Hello again, friends, and you are our friends, and welcome back to another edition of Jim Cornette's Drive Thru right here, wherever it is that you are, on this beautiful Monday afternoon, assuming it's beautiful somewhere, maybe only in your state of mind, but not actually in your locale. I am your host, the great Brian Last, and of course the man joining me, the man who'll be answering your questions, which are sent in so many times to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com or on Twitter using the hashtag CornyDriveThru. He is the exalted one of the cult of Cornette, the Caligula of Louisville, Kentucky, Mr. Jim Cornette.
Are we done yet?
Do you snore, sir?
What?
Do you snore? The first question on the drive-thru this week. Are you a snorer?
Of course I don't snore. You'd have to be an idiot to think I snore. Are we done with this show yet?
We're just getting going.
Okay. Well, my day is winding down. My day, I got up real early this morning, Brian Last. I heard some of your intro there. If it's beautiful in your state of mind. Well, it's beautiful right now, but last night it was in rough shape around here.
What happened?
See, it was Saturday night, last night. It usually is before Sunday. That's when we're recording this, even though you just claimed it was Monday because you're thinking ahead. But it was Saturday night last night, and I tried to stay up. Why are you laughing at me?
Because you're setting it up like a horror movie. It was Saturday night last night, and I was up late.
The sea was angry, my friends. It was a dark and stormy night. It was actually a dark night. Nights usually are, but it didn't get stormy till this morning. So Saturday night, I was trying to stay up and watch Svengoolie, even though I knew what happened with the beast from 20,000 Fathoms. But of course, I went to sleep because I get up early in the morning to service all the Cornette's Collectibles customers. So I went to sleep at 9, I guess. And of course, at 4 o'clock this morning here in metropolitan Louisville, Kentucky, comes the thunderstorm and the crashing and the banging and the thunder and the lightning would light up the whole room through the curtains, and the thunder was crashing. It was like, as Joe LeDuc would said, it was like having a symphony orchestra right next to your head, and of course it jolts everybody awake. Well, now I've been asleep for 7 hours. Right? Because I'm an old man and I go to bed early so I can get all my proper sleep, so I can get very sick from this point and die. And now that I've been asleep for 7 hours, it's 4 o'clock in the morning. I'm trying to lay there. I can't go back to sleep. And of course, Stacy can go back to sleep immediately. Harley can go back to sleep immediately. I'm done. So I get up. It's pitch black. So I look at the current state of the world on the internet. I can't see outside because what's really on my mind is the high winds I've just had, as you'll recall. We've talked about it here on the programs. Thousands of dollars of tree work done this year. Just got the yard all cleaned up. Everything's done. The back corner, things are looking good. I'm scared. I got these old massive trees on the property that, every time these 50-mile-an-hour winds come, I'm just crossing my fingers. So I got that weighing on me. But I can't see because it's dark. So I piss some people off on Twitter, and then I go and pack some more Cornette's Collectibles orders to be shipped out this week. And the daylight comes, and I look outside, and all the limbs are fine. Of course, leaves have blown around everywhere. But all the trees are fine. Everything's in the right place it's supposed to be. And the sun's peeking out. And it turns out that it becomes a bright and sunny day, but it's still windy. So I go out about 9:30, 9:45 to take little Harley for a walk. And what do I spy? Let me backtrack for a minute, Brian, so all the new people, the people that have joined the program since last year can understand this. Last year, we got one of those gazebo tents to put over the fire pit in the backyard, because the built-in gazebo with the barbecue is in phase 3 of the Castle Cornette landscaping project, which has been pushed back at least a year because of the COVID fiasco. But anyway, we got one of the tents to go over the fire pit area and the seating area there. It looked like a Maharaja's location there. And it was very nice. And then as wintertime came, we wanted it to be an all-weather kind of thing, so we got the heavy canvas instead of the sheer curtain type of thing. You know what I'm talking about, the lingerie type of curtains that just fly away. We got the heavy canvas ones, so it would keep the heat in, right?
Not the lingerie,
so,
yeah.
Not like lingerie. That lets all the heat out. But anyway, the week after we put these up, an unseasonable early winter, late fall windstorm comes through and takes that goddamn big canvas fucking tent that's on all sides now as camp and just gets up under it and turns it upside down and makes it like a goddamn parachute and blows it all the way across the yard into the fucking side of the house. And there, me and Stacy are both out there holding ropes and trying to pull it away with the actual wind and rain still going on, pre-dawn, cold weather.
Oh, man.
It was not good.
I wish I could see this.
Well, you can't because there's no video. And even if there was, I would have bought all the copies.
I'm picturing you on the set of The Wizard of Oz before the house went up.
All right, good one. Well, unfortunately, we didn't kill the witch. But anyway, so this year, there's that fire pit and the chairs and everything just sitting out there all just in the middle of nowhere. So I said, look here, we ain't going to do that again. We're going to get one of those things, but it's just going to have a top on it. It's just going to have even more sheer. You're talking about the crotchless pantyhose of curtains, the G-string material of just the light stuff that just flies away. And that way we won't, and we're going to bolt this thing in the ground, not bolt it, but the hook's the thing you drive in with the hammer and you hit the hand of pudding and it goes through. And we had the guys come out and put it all together and everything. And all year, every storm we've had, the wind just whips right through the sides of these curtains and flies away. And it's bolted into the ground. Until this morning when the sun came out and the wind picked up. And I go out, I look around as I'm fucking walking Harley. And the thing's upside down again across the other side of the yard, and it's into one of the new trees that I planted. The wind didn't take any of my old tree limbs down. This thing crashed into one of my new trees I just planted 6 or 7 years ago and broke 2 or 3 of the little baby limbs off. And it's also massively upside down, and the legs are bent everywhere, and what the fuck? And so, long story short, we had to cut the goddamn top of it off of the goddamn frame to get the wind to quit dragging it down the yard. It had already gone about 50 or 60 feet. And now I'm recording this program with you, and then my day is going to be over with. See, that's the way these things are going to work out today. Now, what have you got to put me in a good mood there, fella?
I can't speak to your mood, but we have lots of questions.
Don't call me fella, guy.
Lots of questions.
I'm not your guy, pal. Don't call me pal, son. All right, anyway.
Well, pal, we have lots of questions.
You will be happy to know. However, let me get this in.
Please.
Let me just get this in like you weren't going to anyway, right? that because of this early morning that I had, every single order, if you have ordered merchandise from JimCornette.com, one of the fine Cornette's Collectibles customers, every piece of merchandise ordered through Friday night at midnight of Friday the 13th, that was a great day for me, but Sunday the 15th sucks donkey cock. But anyway, I digress. If you ordered through Friday night at midnight on November 13th, your orders will be in the mail Monday morning, November 16th, I guess. Whatever the fuck. Do the math, people.
It is, in fact, November 16th. You were correct.
Well, there you go. See, I'm right. I divined that, pulled that knowledge straight out of the air.
Right off the calendar.
And I am sending out T-shirts And face mask, Cornette face mask. Thank you, fuck you, bye face mask to really enforce the social distancing. I'm sending out burger towels. I'm sending out books. I'm sending out classic wrestling DVDs. I'm sending out behind the curtain graphic novels. Now the softcover in its third printing. I'm sending out autographed pictures and Cult of Cornette membership certificates on heavy cardstock. For low prices, high-quality merchandise, JimCornette.com, Cornette's Collectibles. Good guy. And Christmas is coming, folks. It's going to be a hard, long Christmas if you don't get your family and friends some stocking stuffers like a thank you, fuck you, bye face mask. They're not going to ever look at you the same if you do not get them their own official Cult of Cornette burger towel. Whatever you want, it's right there, JimCornette.com. You can stock a stuffing. I get a big stocking. I've got enough you can stuff in it. All right, it's your show.
You bring up Christmas, and something that many of us who are your friends got used to over the years were your witty little Christmas cards. When did that tradition start?
Well, actually, I always just thought that it was the thing you do at Christmas to send all of your friends Christmas cards and all the people that you talk to or correspond with or interact with or whatever in your address book. And so I started doing that, in the early 80s, I guess. But then by the early 90s, that list had ballooned. So, because back then you got everybody's address. There was no email. There was no cell phones. You got everybody's mailing address and phone number. That's the way you stayed in contact, right? But I think it ended up, but I think the height of it was in Connecticut, where I was trying to do something to stay sane. I was sending out like 250, 300 Christmas cards, and I would go through and I would try to pick the joke. I would get a bunch of joke Christmas cards, and I'd try to pick the joke for the person that might appreciate it the best. Nah, they wouldn't like that one. Nah, they like that one. Whatever the fuck. And I'd address everything and sign it. And then I think OVW ended the tradition, not only because I was so incredibly busy constantly that I didn't have time, but also that's the era when I realized that all the people I still had a mailing address for practically were dead. And then you didn't get people's address anymore. You got their email. Well, I'm not going to email somebody Merry Christmas. What the fuck? That's, the same thing as saying, hey, I know you, so Merry Christmas, Anyway, so then and then also back then, in those days, you could get the funny Hallmark card for like $1 25 or whatever, less than $1 a piece if you bought a box of 10. Now they're like my Christmas cards would have cost $1,500 these days. And then there's the postage.
And then there's the postage.
And you
hand wrote each one. I mean, every address on the envelope, every
Yes, well,
card.
I still do that. I do a lot more addresses now than I did then, just once a year.
That's true.
But well, yeah, because it's Merry Christmas, but nobody, I think I still get an actual Christmas card in the mail from like Dennis and Teresa Condrey and Tommy Young and Tom Pritchard, maybe, I think, because I usually get birthdays from him. But like people my age or older, in Thompson's case, that actually have still lived in the same place and still have people's addresses, but it's fewer and farther between.
All right. Well, let's get to some questions here.
Well, boy, really cheer me up.
I thought so, talking about Christmas past.
Yeah, talking about all the friends I used to have and all the people I used to know that are no longer with us, and I don't have their address to send them a card anyway. But it wouldn't matter because they can't read it.
Well,
Jesus Christ. Hey, have you told the people?
Told them
the
what?
People out there in the Cult of Cornette, they're looking to us, Brian, as a beacon of shining light in a sea of misinformation. They're looking to us as they used to look to the titans of journalism. They're all the people across the oceans in foreign countries are looking to us to give the news in the United States of America. We just ladies and gentlemen, America's stalker has not given up yet. We broke up with him, but he won't leave us alone. And I'm just saying, people of Pennsylvania, be on the lookout, because sooner or later you're going to come home and Punxsutawney Phil is going to be in a pot of boiling water. because we're not going to get rid of this fucking whiny little orange bitch. No matter what we do, we fed it, and now the pig will not go away once it's been fed. So just the update. The current president of the United States is still a whiny little bitch who will not admit he lost the election and is tweeting like a lunatic that he's still going to be president and all of these people cheated him. While meanwhile, the rest of the world is going on as responsible people do, preparing for a new president. Just wanted to give the update. You hadn't updated that yet, had you, Brian? Did I sleep through that part?
I had not updated any political news here on the drive-thru so far.
I just wanted to get into it. All right, just the update so people will know where we stand.
Well, if you enjoyed that, I'm sure there'll be more for Jim to get into this week on The Experience, wherever you find your favorite podcasts, debuting Friday. But let's get some drive-thru questions in here, and I'm sure you're aware of this. A very, very popular topic. We've received a flood of emails about this. Has been WWE firing Zelina Vega. Let me read one of these questions. This one was sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Simon Robb in Brisbane, Australia. My question is related to the latest cuts from the WWE, in particular, Zelina Vega. It has been announced she was let go from the company over tweets about unionization. Wanted to know your thoughts about the situation, and do you think WWE were right in their decision to let go one of their top female performers, and do you think this could have repercussions for other talent talking or mentioning unionization in WWE?
Well, first of all, I'm glad that you read that question that was worded that way, so we can clear this up, at least somewhat. To my understanding, a lot of people have taken this and run with it, that she was fired because of the tweet that she tweeted, "I support unionization." That's what, somehow people have gone off on that tangent. Is that what you're hearing, or is this just what I'm reading on Twitter and they don't know what the fuck they're talking about?
Well, I think since that tweet, more has come out, but before anyone knew the fact that she had been, she either was released or, I shouldn't say released, fired. I mean, she's still under a 90-day non-compete, so she's not fully released. But before they fired her, she knew she was fired before it was public. And then she tweeted out, "I support unionization," but the public didn't know already that this had gone down.
Well, but good God, how much it doesn't take Sherlock Holmes to put together when the company has the announcement ready and sent out 10 minutes after her tweet that this was not cause and effect. Obviously, as I said, it does not take, follow me, Dr. Watson. What's obviously happened is that they were talking, she got hot because she didn't want to give up her, as they call it, the third party, whether it be the Twitch or her outside social media, and they had come to an impasse on that, and she wasn't going to fucking take it down, and they said, "Well, we're going to let you go," and she said, "Okay," and then they did, and then when they told her that they were going to, she tweeted out, "I support unionization." That, to me, would be the logical chain of events. Is that what you are understanding from anybody else that's the way it happened?
From what I understand, and I may not be fully aware of all the details here, she was one of the people who had a Twitch account, had a third-party account, that when the company realized all this was happening and they cracked down on it, she was one of the people that was very hesitant about the idea of giving this up for many different reasons. One, she's an independent contractor. Two, this is a way for her to directly have a connection, both monetarily, but also just in terms of communication with her fan base, lots of various reasons. And from what I understand, she recently opened up another third-party account, an OnlyFans page. OnlyFans is something, and this isn't in no way to associate her with this, but a lot of adult performers have used, but now you're seeing people in wrestling and other walks of life use it, where it's a subscription service, and you subscribe for access for whatever it may be, videos or photos or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
And she started doing that, not under the name Zelina Vega. She did not use the WWE name there, but reportedly that was the final straw, and that caused them to dismiss her. Now, obviously, that was her doubling down And I believe she had every right to do that and saying, I'm going to do this. And they reacted by immediately firing her, which, no surprise, has gotten a ton of attention. I mean, this is a period of time where we've heard Andrew Yang start getting involved, talking about the idea that if Biden becomes president, which now we know he has, he's about to be president, he's the president-elect, that if he's not the Secretary of Labor, he will know the Secretary of Labor. You know, if it's Bernie Sanders, he'll know Bernie Sanders. So this creates a very interesting moment, and I guess the other important note I would make here, because we've addressed it on the show previously, the idea of unionization, the idea of the Screen Actors Guild getting involved with professional wrestling.
Well, which I saw there was a tweet from Gabrielle Carteris, and she used to be on a popular show, but apparently now she is president of the Screen Actors Guild.
She was on 90210 with actually,
there you go.
With Jungle Boy's dad. Yeah.
Yes. Well, there. See, there you go. Hey, maybe Jungle Boy will be the president of the Wrestlers Union.
That's not
well.
Crazy.
First of all, let me say directly to Zelina Vega. Because I'm sorry we don't have a budget for better than that. Because yes, somebody finally said no. I'd just rather do this because it's not fair. I'm doing something not involving wrestling, not under my wrestling name, and we've talked about that on the program. That opens up a whole other can of kayfabe, but at the same point, that horse has already left the barn. But I'm doing something on my own, not in wrestling, not under my name that I work for you under, and you don't want me to do that either. Fuck you. I'd rather do this. I applaud her. But at the same time, I understand why they released her, because can you imagine what if they hadn't have? And then everybody else would have, they'd be pointing at her because that's what the guys and girls in the locker room do. She can do it. Why can't I? So their whole thing's shot, which for the various reasons we've talked about, their whole thing is questionable at best and should be shot or at least euthanized. But right now, especially, this is the time if all the guys just said no. If it's wrestling and or my name that I wrestle for you, then you can control that. But if it's something not to do with wrestling, that if I want to go out and goddamn go over here and act in a fucking dinner theater or race go-karts or whatever the fuck it may be, and I'm not even using my name there, then fuck you. Biden is going to be president. We know Andrew Yang, who was a candidate for president, and everybody's going to say, well, he got like 2%. Okay, motherfucker, did you get 2% of the fucking vote for president? So fuck you. He's up there. He knows these people, and he's sympathetic, and he's a fan. And on the other side of the fence, a lot of these people in Hollywood, apparently now that we know with SAG-AFTRA, are either wrestling fans or have a wrestling connection. So I think WWE shot themselves in the foot, not by releasing Zelena over this at this time, but by bringing up this whole thing at this time, by bringing it up this summer whenever they started this, because I know they hired that guy from Hollywood to come in, but I'm from Hollywood. Andy Kaufman would have run the fucking company better. But the big Hollywood bigwig executive, his name's Khan too, right? So Khans are running both companies.
Nick Khan.
Yeah, Khans are running both companies. We could have said that at any point probably in history. But anyway, they've started this because they want to control everything, but they did it in a pandemic when all these guys have found out that, not only are we not going to return to live shows anytime soon, but we can make extra money doing this shit without beating our bodies up. And in some cases, it's preferable. So I don't think they should have brought this whole thing up. Once they've opened this can of worms with wanting to own everybody's shit, then they had to fire Zelena for not doing what they wanted her to do, because then everybody else would have said, well, what about Zelena? You let her get away with it. And then they've got no teeth, but they were stupid to start this at this particular point anyway, when a lot of these guys are finding out how screwed they're getting. Who would have thunk?
And the other thing is
Zelena.
the money. Who would have thought the shortest woman on the roster would be the one to do the biggest thing? But, the other interesting thing is the money, because obviously she makes money on her Twitch account, and she'll make money with her OnlyFans account. Let's think about the money she'd be making from WWE. I don't know how much merchandising there is on her, but house show money, that's gone. Pay-per-view money. What's pay-per-view money nowadays?
Not much.
Yeah. It's all based on the whims of Vince in its best moments, and now it's based on the network.
If you're not featured in the video games or the things that they still actually sell, since the network has nullified DVD sales and pay-per-view, then I can't imagine it's that meaningful or consequential.
Because I've heard it said that she may be one of the people, that there are people who make as much money from their Twitch accounts as they would from their current WWE deal.
Well, and now some people are going to say, and rightfully so, well, they got to be stars first for anybody to give a shit, right? And let's face it, I've seen some people send me clips of some people's things that they do on the internet that are not that particularly that entertaining, right? But they get an audience because people know who they are. So yes, you do have to be a star, a celebrity, or spread your name out there some way first. But for some people who have already done that in the WWE and who may think they've gone as far as they're going to go, or maybe it's going to start heading downhill from here, it might not be so attractive to give this up. And also, as I said, for people who, and it's not like at the same time as a lot of these modern wrestling talents are all doing the promos where this is my lifelong dream. I'm so happy to be here, to the point where the people don't think they're stars anymore, because stars are never just happy to be there. You know what I'm saying? But they do it all, or they all do it. And a lot of them mean that. But at the same time, when other opportunities come along, a lot of people fly away, or they find out wrestling's not for them or whatever, at a much higher turnover rate. You don't have as many guys staying in the business till they were in their 50s. Even if the style would hold up to it, or the body would hold up to the style. So a lot of because it's not that much fun when you get into that machine and that environment for a lot of people, as we've seen. Maybe wrestling is fun, but the WWE's not fun. So a lot of these people may want to do something else, even if it's not wrestling, if it's the video games or the cosplay or whatever. I don't know why I would pay, or anyone would pay money to see someone dress up in things, unless it was in person in the room at the time. And but nevertheless, my mind is wandering. I lack sleep. So for a lot of these guys, they may be able to make a name for themselves in other directions and not need the WWE. So yeah, if you thought genuinely in your mind that you could be one of the top guys and earn Randy Orton level money or Undertaker level money or Cena level money or whatever for a long period of time, you'll put up with stuff like this. But for the people who have been injured, ain't figured in, not necessarily want to do this for the rest of their life, just actually say, fuck it, what's right is right, and I won't fucking put up with this. Whatever the case, there's going to be those people.
Can you imagine the conversation with Zelina Vega and Gabrielle Cardieras from SAG, where she starts asking questions? I'm assuming she knows nothing about wrestling. And she'll ask, are you given a script? Are you told where to report to? Do you own your character name? Oh, you were given your character name. Do you have to supply your own transportation? Just one question after another. She's going to go, oh my God. These are actors. Not that wrestling's always been this way, but WWE is a whole different animal than traditional wrestling. And you can't look at what they're doing.
Yeah.
Especially right now, where everything is so scripted, and not say that this is acting. This is television acting.
Well, and besides that, at this point now, they are in a situation where they are legitimately shooting only a television production or pay-per-view production or internet production with no fans. So it's the same thing as shooting Beverly Hills 90210. And they're even using their own version of a laugh track, the fake crowd noise. So more than ever, maybe something good will come out of this. And you may be selling Gabrielle Carteris, old Gab, you may be selling her short because if she knows the Perry family, she may know a little bit about wrestling, but she may be shocked to find out details of the WWE environment.
Now, I'm not a union expert, and I'm not assuming you are either, but maybe you would know the answer because I don't know the ins and outs.
Well, I've played one on television before, but
That's
go ahead.
right. Fight, the Federation of International Thugs and Eliminators. Who could ever forget you guys picketing Smoky Mountain Wrestling? What a visual that was.
Unfair.
But if SAG, let's say in a couple of weeks, a couple of months, if they say that we've been investigating this, we've decided that we will now accept professional wrestlers, and you really have to figure out how that works because it can't be every professional wrestler. It has to be maybe professional wrestlers on national television working for these companies. We accept them into the union. What's the WWE's move? Because they can't just say if you join that union, you're fired. That's illegal, isn't it?
Well, here, I don't know which may be coming first, the chicken or the egg here. Because I don't know that the Screen Actors Guild can suddenly just say, well, we're going to take professional wrestlers due to their laws or whatever. But at the same point, they fit all the criteria of television or movie actors, as we've just said. The IRS, I think, and once again, I think we mentioned this on a previous show here recently, more than a union right now, the wrestlers could benefit from an IRS reclassification, which Andrew Yang probably would have played more of a part in than the president of SAG. You can't make anyone in WWE is its own unique beast right now. You can't say professional wrestling or professional wrestlers. You have to, by the nature of it, go after the WWE because they're the only ones that blatantly do not fit the classification of independent contractor and blatantly fit all the criteria for their talent to have some kind of union. Even AEW, we've mentioned it. They let their guys wrestle other places. They bring in guys for one shot or limited nights or whatever, blah, blah, blah. That it would not work if you try. And then the WWE's defense, if Jerry McDevitt's still on his game, would be to say, well, then why are you targeting us and going after us and not any other professional wrestling promoter? That's where it gets sticky. But some way or another, the point is they're drawing attention to themselves, the WWE, and trying to control another aspect of their talents, lives, careers, money-making opportunities whatsoever, while still hanging on to a system that was correct in professional wrestling, but has long since not been applicable to the way that they interact with their independent contractors. And if there's a new Democratic administration with a wrestling fan in or near the cabinet, I don't think they should be down in the fucking outhouse stirring up the shit.
How smart was she to tweet out, I support unionization right before they went public with the announcement?
She was very, and even more diplomatic than some people would have been. Can you imagine some people in the wrestling business on Twitter?
Can you imagine if there was Twitter when Jesse Ventura tried to unionize in 1986? And I forget if he was fired or just sent home, but remember, he tried to unionize. Hulk Hogan snitched him out to Vince McMahon, which Vince McMahon revealed in a federal deposition.
Yeah.
And right around the same time, Jesse booked The Predator, and Vince wouldn't let him do it. Jesse went and did it. Vince wasn't going to bring him back. It was NBC that insisted they wanted Jesse Ventura. When they renewed Saturday night's main event, they intended to have one of the stars of the show, Jesse Ventura. So Vince had to bring him back. And before Vince brought him back, Jesse also booked The Running Man. So he got 2 movies out of the deal. But imagine if there was Twitter when Jesse Ventura tried to unionize in 86, right before WrestleMania 2.
Oh, my God. Yeah, well, but if there'd have been Twitter at that point, we'd have had a whole host of other problems.
I have some audio here of Zelina Vega I could play you. This is I'm not exactly sure if this is from her Twitch channel or her OnlyFans. I think it's Twitch, but I'm not certain.
Well, we own no rights to this and are only playing it in support of whatever she has to say because we like her.
We're playing it to for review purposes, and obviously want to get her point of view on this. It may be from YouTube now that I look at it, but just so you know, because I did hear a few seconds of this before, there was some background noise you'll hear because apparently she's, I think, playing a video game while she's talking. So you may hear, like, what the hell's going on? It sounds like she's in a spaceship. That's why. But let me play a little bit of this and hear what you think.
I'm sad. I'm completely heartbroken. But Broncos fan, thank you. Obviously, this isn't the last that you're going to see of me. I don't know what the future's going to hold. I don't know what's going to happen, but I do know I'm going to be here, so I hope you all will stay. But God, my heart is beating so fast. I love you all, though, and I'm really, really thankful to each and every single one of you. If I go down as someone who stood up for themselves and, you know, so be it. But I'm still thankful, and I'm not angry. I'm just heartbroken. Because doing this, being a wrestler is all I ever wanted to do. Snake Twisted, thank you. So I don't really know what to say. I don't really know. Like, there's so many things that I want to say, but I don't know how. Like I said, I'm just saying thank you to everybody. Thank you for the amazing locker room that I had, all the girls that supported me, from the makeup ladies to the referees, everybody, people in the office, everyone, the crowd, everyone, literally everyone. Thank you, Sensei. I'll forever be passionate and forever be thankful for everything that I've ever gotten. I've worked so hard for this all my life. You know, I started when I was 17. And, yeah. Professor John Gotti, thank you.
I'll stop it there. Some of the people she's addressing are obviously users on this page. That's why you hear Professor John Gotti and Sensei. That's not her actual sensei, but there she is. Obviously, she sounds
and also
a bit upset.
Let me applaud her again. And she falls into the category of one of those people who wanted to do this and wanted to be involved in this, but still wasn't going to put up with shit that she didn't feel was right. And that was a heartfelt statement. I wish it had not sounded like she was making it from the set of a remake of War of the Worlds. It would have carried some even more emotional gravitas. But that's the thing is, at this point, if you sign on to the WWE now, it's not even like the old Hollywood studio system where you're not only given your name and your character and your parts, and you're told to lose weight, or you're told this or that or whatever, but now they're picking their hobbies for them. Or telling them how they can monetize their hobby. If somebody's figured out a way to make money playing video games online, bless them, because what the fuck, right? But it's a thing. But
obviously, she's an incredibly talented performer. She has been, everything I've seen with her going back to NXT, she's been fantastic. And it seems that since the pandemic, she was elevated. I mean, they were the main event program those weeks where we watched Monday Night Raw. She was kind of in the mix there. She has a lot of national exposure. Is it a no-brainer that AEW should bring her in when the 90-day non-compete is up?
Well, oh boy.
Because there aren't that many people that AEW has been able to get who have been at that level, featured at that level on WWE.
Well,
you know, Brody Lee is now being featured at that level in AEW, but he wasn't at that level in WWE. Moxley was. Jericho was, but that's really it.
Here's the thing: the joke writes itself. If she's good at playing video games, she's a natural for AEW. If they're trying to remake their women's division, which hopefully they are. Apparently they got Serena Deeb now. They've I would assume that Jane Cargill is not going to be a wrestler. If she wrestles like she talks, we're all in trouble.
I believe she is training to be a wrestler. Yes.
Well,
and her name is Jade, not
is,
Jane.
Huh?
Jade, not Jane.
Jane Cargill. That's what I said. That's the way she said it to me when she tried to figure out what it was. Anyway, yeah, they should add her because she's a personality, and a large segment, possibly most of the wrestling audience, obviously knows who she is. If she's making that kind of money with Twitch and everything else, does she need that? No, but if she likes wrestling as much as she was just saying, maybe she'd want to. But then they're running the risk of two things. When they bring in people, they've brought in people like Serena to their women's division that showed how shitty the rest of their women were. But if they're remaking that, but then also the problem is when they bring people in from the WWE, as you mentioned, it's sketchy as to whether they'll be as popular as they were or be doing something stupid. But this girl doesn't sound like, I can believe Miro is a simpleton. I can believe he's just a grinning idiot and just doesn't realize what business he's in, and he's goofy and he doesn't know how to get himself over. Then he likes to play the bleach blonde Q-tip Minnie Mouse t-shirt wearing video game playing fucking, update of Mighty Igor and Ivan Putski, whatever. But this girl sounds sharp. What are you laughing at?
I hadn't thought of the Igor comparison.
Well, there you go. All he needs is a fucking kielbasa, and he'll be just farting through silk. But
the little hat, yeah.
And the little hat, yes. Anyway, Zelena sounds like not only has she been a lifelong wrestling fan, and she's obviously a good performer, but she sounds like she got her head on straight. So maybe she wouldn't go in there, and if they let her do her shit, maybe she'd be good. I don't know. I don't know if it's because they bring in ex-WWE talent and make them look even goofier because they don't know what to do with them, or because they let the talent tell them what they want to do. I haven't determined which is going on there yet. Maybe she could reverse that trend.
Two final questions on this topic. One, I believe her real name is it Thea Trinidad? I don't know if it's Tia or Thea.
I believe. No, I think it's Thea. She was in Impact. In TNA in the TNA days, I think. Also, she's been around for quite a while.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. Did you ever have any? Did you ever work with her? Did you ever run into her anywhere?
Yes, just a bit. I think it was there. As a matter of fact, I'm old and I haven't slept recently, but I've met her several times, as I recall, and I think she was a nice girl and no issues. I haven't had any extended interaction, but I've never heard it. She's one of the ones that you don't hear anything bad or goofy about, I believe. Wasn't it her father that was killed in the World Trade Center?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, and that's, as a matter of fact, that's I remember watching some of those shows when they tried to make her a heel. They announced that they didn't announce it, but it was a known fact as part of her backstory, and she had said on television that her father was killed in 9/11, and then they tried to switch. They did switch her heel on the program, and I read about this. This is not when I was around, but apparently they did a taping down there on 9/11 and had her come out and give an emotional speech and thank people for cheering or something that they did or whatever, and then come back on a taping and be a heel. You stupid motherfuckers. They didn't know what they had when they had it. They never knew what they had when they had it.
Well, I guess the last part of this question would be Aleister Black, who's her husband. He is still working for WWE. The rumor is that he recently asked, when all this was going down with his wife, he asked if he could be sent back to NXT instead of being on the main roster. He didn't want to do that anymore, and that request was denied. I don't know how true that is, but it's a big rumor going around. What do you think about his situation? I mean, we've seen, I hate to go back to Rusev, but Rusev's in AEW. A lot of people seem to think his wife is being punished in WWE. I think it's, from what I read, 8 weeks in a row, they've had someone put her through a table.
What?
Yeah, 8 weeks in a row. And it may have been Nia Jax.
Wait a minute. Even Nia, after number 3, it's not stretching credibility that she's still walking the next fucking week? The 8 weeks, this has got to be a rib. This cannot have actually happened.
I'm looking it up right now while we talk about this. But
I double dog dare you to prove that actually something like that actually happened. We just told a story recently with Bubba Ray Dudley in a dark match at my TV taping in OVW. Powerbombed Jillian Hall through a table. I had to leave her off for fucking everything for 2 weeks to sell it. And she's taken 8 tables in 8 weeks in a row.
Well, while I look this up,
yeah.
Actually, I'm look at here. Here's a tweet from WWE November 9th. So earlier this week as we were recording, or last week, I guess I should say. The tweet it's a picture of Nia Jax picking her up, and the clip is Nia Jax putting her through the table. And it says, 8th time, 8th time, 8th time, 8th time. Apparently this has been happening each and every week. So whether that is or isn't a punishment for the fact that her husband has been vocal about what they've been doing. Again, Lana's another one who's been made a lot of money on third-party deals. What do you think this says for the future of Aleister Black?
Well, to be honest, I kind of surprised that he didn't fucking bid adios when his wife did, especially if they brought him up, I guess, he was one of Heyman's guys, right? That Heyman wanted to push.
I think so.
And and of course they fire Paul, so if he probably wasn't enjoying what he was doing on Raw and liked it better in NXT because it wasn't as goofy as Raw and asked to be sent back there, and they didn't want to do it, which indicates already that they're grumpy with him and that he ain't happy. So I'm kind of surprised if his wife said sayonara, that he didn't, like when I walked out of the locker room with Ole at center stage that night, and Stan was coming the other way. I said, Stan, give me your car keys. He said, what? I said, I got to get my bag. I'm going home. He said, fuck, hold on. I'll go with you. It was just like one of those. I'm surprised he's lasted this long. I would suggest he probably needs to get the fuck out of there. But besides that, can you enjoy going to work or want to work someplace that just pissed your wife off enough to quit, or vice versa, the wife when the husband quit? I don't see that would ever be a thing that was going to work out for a while.
Well, Jim, one thing that a lot of people in wrestling have learned is that you need someone to be on your side during these battles. You need someone in your corner fighting for you. And I have to say, more and more wrestlers and people in the wrestling business have been looking for a man and been reaching out to a man who is always there to defend the little guy, always there to defend the person who needs a little bit of help. And I think you know who I'm talking about.
Well, I know that as soon as Zelina Vega tweeted, I support unionization, the gentleman that you are referring to and discussing tweeted back, we need to talk because this stuff is illegal, immoral, unethical, and fattening. And no, ladies and gentlemen, I am not talking about Senator Claghorn. I'm not talking about Foghorn J. Leghorn. I'm talking about the only man who can stand up to the perilous shark-infested waters of legal treachery and shine the beacon of justice down upon you like the rain of manna from heaven. One man.
Call Stephen P. News. If you need to sue. An outlaw mud show or two. He'll sue the rest.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, his name has been a household word. And as we've mentioned before in the past, so is garbage. But unlike that, Stephen P. New doesn't stink, and you can use him over and over again. He's good year-round. Folks, Stephen P. New has been a star on the program here, but now he is, as a matter of fact, branching out into professional wrestling in a variety of ways. He's already taken some cases that shall remain nameless and is looking at others, but he can handle yours, whether you are one of the people that have been affected or harmed by the opioid addiction problem and the class action suit right now going on with the big pharmaceutical companies. Those are filing very early next year. So if you haven't already contacted the newlawoffice.com, 888-692-8084, do it soon. The defective earplugs from 3M that damaged the hearing of some of our service people. That suit is filing in the next couple months. And a variety of others, including nursing home abuse. Stephen P. New is taking care of you from the cradle to the grave. And I can tell you from personal conversation that he is just itching to be able to represent someone with a case that can take down some of the misclassifications of certain people's employment statuses in this industry today, because he has done a variety of reading up on such a thing. But he can help you too, folks. 888-692-8084. Our friend, Stephen P. New at thenewlawoffice.com. Holy mackerel.
Well, Jim,
what do you got?
Another very popular topic that's coming this week, and I guess I have to ask you about it. What are your thoughts about Kenny Omega being elected into the Wrestling Observer Newsletter Hall of Fame?
I mean, what do you say at this point? Dave has, I wish I had someone as dedicated to my furthering my career and standing in the community and my legend and my profile and my brand and etc. as Uncle Dave is for Olivier. But can you honestly tell me, Brian, do you think is this the first case? Because I know he never used to rig it. I've been a voter for 30-something years. Didn't always get my people in, but I voted because I knew a bunch of other people had voted. I assumed it was on the up and up. The only thing that I've heard, I've not seen the issue yet. The only thing that I've heard is that he got the base of his support came from wrestling, how does he phrase it? Wrestling journalists, wrestling reporters. What retired wrestler? Because those are the categories. What are the categories? You probably know them better than I do. Wrestling reporters,
historians, reporters, active wrestlers, retired wrestlers.
Active wrestlers, retired wrestlers. Name me a historian or a retired wrestler that would have wasted a vote when Wild Bull Curry is still not in the Wrestling Observer Hall of Fame, or Big Daddy for those across the pond, or whatever, for all of the case of the sake of the names, the great names in our industry that are not still yet involved in this Hall of Fame. What historian or what retired wrestler is going to waste a pick on Kenny Olivier? So that boils it down to current wrestlers, and I have no faith anymore in current wrestlers for the most part, and wrestling reporters, and we understand the base of the support was from reporters. So did Dave just send out a bunch of new ballots this year? Boy, the ballot fucking controversy may not be the one we thought it was. Did Dave send out a bunch more ballots to wrestling reporters that would vote for this twat just to get him in the Hall of Fame and not be embarrassed when his self-proclaimed greatest wrestler ever in the history of the world didn't get into the Hall of Fame that he sponsors? Therein lies the question.
Well, let me say a few things, because obviously I'm in the midst, actually, right now, this weekend, of recording the 605 Superpodcast Wrestling Observer Hall of Fame special, where we get different panel discussions with various voters from across the world and get everyone's point of view on this.
You did vote, by the way. Did you vote for Kenny Olivier?
I did not vote for Kenny Omega. And
you were not on the Twinkle Toes train?
I'll be honest, I wouldn't vote for him because he's in the middle of his career. Whatever you want to say about what he's done, bad or good. And obviously you could point to certain things like the Okada matches, like the success in the Tokyo Dome. There's a lot of people who say there would be no AEW without Omega versus Jericho. And again, AEW is still in its infancy, so we can't really judge if that's a noteworthy thing going forward or not.
We can't judge if that's a good thing or a bad thing, though, right now.
But I wouldn't vote for Kenny Omega for the reason that he still hasn't done anything in America. he's in the middle of his career. It's too early. Because then you're really just basing it on a very short period of time. But, one of the things...
But he's the greatest wrestling artist of all time.
Well, again, that's hype. I don't believe that.
That's what I'm saying. Could Dave face... Could Uncle Dave have been here, now that I'm thinking, like our current ex-president? Could he face the idea that in his own publication, that his guy that he has proclaimed the greatest of all time, better than Flair and Funk and Steamboat and this guy and that guy and the other guy, wouldn't get in his Hall of Fame that he has built and sponsored and runs every year? So he sent out a bunch of ballots to people he knew would vote for the...
I don't personally believe that. I think there are a lot of...
How did he get in with no historians and no retired wrestlers voting for him?
Let me put it this way. Without naming names, I'm familiar with some ballots of some modern wrestlers. And if you're a historian, you'd be horrified by these ballots. Horrified. And there's no justification for some of these people being voted for when you could say, well, this person was really good. This person had some good matches, but not Hall of Fame level in any way. You'll hear, well, he was one of my favorites. Or, well, I liked watching him when I was a kid. So, I mean, the active wrestlers, that's a category where maybe there should be less ballots sent to them. Reporters, I don't know who all the reporters are that are voting. Some of these goofs, and we've talked about how anyone can anoint themselves a wrestling journalist. I don't know who Dave sends a ballot to or not.
That's the Bitchley rule, right?
That would be the Yenta Bixenspan rule. But I think it's important to note here, because I've seen a lot of people on Twitter jump on Dave for this, and it's not fair. Dave didn't just put him in the Hall of Fame. There is a body that votes. And it's a body of various ages across the world, active wrestlers, retired wrestlers, people like me who study the history of wrestling, and I guess people who report in one sense or another on the current events in wrestling. But I'll give you another example. Get away from Kenny Omega for a second. And I talk about this on my special, taking nothing away from this guy, because I've heard nothing but good things about him. I never met him, never talked to him, heard nothing but great things about him from everyone who I know. I had never talked to Bob Brown or Bob Geigel about him, but everyone else. But Larry Matisic came in first.
Oh, what a prick he was. No,
Larry Matisic
was a great guy.
Great guy.
Because of the line.
He was the number one person voted on by historians to be in the Hall of Fame. Above, I'm looking at the list here, above Don Owen, above Sergeant Slaughter, above Jackie Pallo, above Morris Siegel, above Enrique Torres and Ted Turner and Bill Goldberg, and the list goes on and on. I got nothing against Larry Matisic. Larry Matisic was a great historian. Larry Matisic was a color commentator for years. He was the voice of St. Louis wrestling for a lot of people. He was obviously Sam Mushnick's assistant for a number of years. He went off on his own and promoted for a short period of time. I'm taking nothing away from him. But to me, I don't look at that and say that person should be in a Hall of Fame, because at that point you're saying, anyone should be in the Hall of Fame. This person was around wrestling for a long time. We liked them. They should be in a Hall of Fame.
Well, no, I gotta pump the brakes. You're not saying anyone just because he was around for a long time. We all liked him. You're saying that you've lowered the bar because of the other people that are not in, that even though that their careers may not been as long, or they may not have been as popular, they were much more prominent on camera or in front of the people, or more pivotal in terms of running the show themselves, etc., etc.
Morris Siegel.
But still, if you put Larry Matisic in a Hall of Fame, that's a wrestling Hall of Fame, that's a lot more palatable than putting in, the guy that ran the mud show and where everybody got infected.
Now, in a sense, this is an interesting way to look at it that came up on my special. Kenny Omega and Larry Matisic, if there was a Wrestling Observer newsletter Hall of Fame, if you're really basing it just around the world of the Observer, they both belong in. Because obviously Kenny Omega, for the match quality that Dave champions, he would be in there. Larry Matisic was someone who spent a lot of time talking to Dave, educating Dave. He would be in there. I mean, it's actually a Hall of Fame around the Observer. But it's not supposed to be just that. It's supposed to be a Wrestling Hall of Fame looking at the entire body of professional wrestling history.
So who padded the ballot box for Olivier?
I can't answer that. I can't answer that.
That was the question that what I had posed earlier. So that's my comment about, maybe we're looking, maybe we've been misdirected. The election that we thought was fair was really crooked, and the election that the ex-president thought was crooked was really fair. But the Wrestling Observer newsletter, the ballot box got padded. That's the only, that people take Dave's opinion now somehow instead of the evidence in front of their own eyes. He has said these things for so long that people think it's true and it must be so, and we've got to get on this bandwagon. We don't want to not vote for a winner. I don't know. But I refuse to believe that any serious, credible wrestling historian or any serious, credible retired wrestler, because you'd have to be near 50 at least by that point, would not be offended by this guy's whole presentation, pretty much. So that's just me.
And again, I look at it from the other way. Good or bad, he's in the middle of his career. You can't look at his entire body of work right now because we're really just looking at a very short period of time where he was elevated to main events in New Japan. It's from that point forward. I don't think there should be people on the ballot while they're actively working. And I get it. No one retires. Jack Briscoe retired. No one retires. But I think.
And hey, if they've elected him now, what happens if he gets caught with Riho playing with his Sega?
Oh, will you stop it?
and then there's a big scandal, and then they've got to have a special recall to see whether he's voted out of it or not.
I am going to guess they're not going to catch him with Riho playing their Sega or whatever that connotation is supposed to really mean. But secondly, hey, look, the Observer Hall of Fame voters didn't vote Chris Benoit out when they had that option.
Well, I've still got faith in Omega.
All right, let's get another question here on this fantastic episode of the Drive Thru. This next one was sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Martin in St. Helens, England. I'm currently watching the new Paul Bearer documentary on the WWE Network and finding out how he started out in the business as a wrestler. Did you have any experiences with him before the WWF? And if not, do you have any stories about him at all? I really find his journey fascinating.
Well, if you want a little over 2 hours of our stories, go to jimcornette.com, click on collectibles, and go to the DVD section. And one of the entire episodes of the Straight Shooting series is me and Percy sitting down, including sharing our mutual dislike for Kevin Dunn. And Percy does a better than I do. And that's available for only $9 plus shipping, by the way. No, I first met Percy. I'd known of him from the time he started managing in the late 70s, when you'd get to the Terry Justice bulletins or the Tom Burke bulletins and you see the clippings from the Culkins in Mississippi. Percy was one of the guys that started down there. He was the same, that Mobile group, Percy Pringle and Mike Hendricks and Robert Gibson and Michael Hayes and John Tatum. All those guys had grown up pretty close to each other, knew each other from going to the matches, and wanted to get into business. And of course, Robert Gibson was Ricky Gibson's younger brother. And they all ended up getting into business. But I first met him in '85 when we first went to work for Crockett. And at a TBS taping, they were bringing in some of the Florida guys because Crockett was still working with the Florida office. This was before he bought it. This was in '85. They were just getting the NWA guys on TBS television. And Percy was managing Rick Rude, who we had worked with when we'd first got to Mid-South. He was on his way out. He went to Memphis in the trade. And they gave him a top spot up there and then sent him to Florida, and Percy was managing him down there, and they came up to do TBS, and he just came up like we'd known each other for years because he was a wrestling fan, and he'd been, reading my articles and the pictures in the wrestling magazine since he was a fan in the 70s, and I was doing the same thing and blah, blah, blah. So we just sat down and talked and just had a wonderful time. And that's, a few times after that, I'd seen him because we were always in a different place. He was in Dallas, for a lot of that period of time when we were in the NWA or TBS. And then he went straight to the WWF to do Paul Bearer, and it took me a while to get there. But then, when we ran into each other after that, it was just like, that's one of the things that I would invariably end up doing at every TV taping was sitting down and talking to fucking Percy Pringle for a while because it was entertaining. And he would roll his eyes at the same thing I'd roll my eyes at because we were wrestling fans and Southern wrestling. And and we'd get excited about the same things or talking about the same matches or whatever. And I've told the story. That's why I say we could do this show about Percy Pringle. But I've told the story before about he and Sonny just hated each other. They just rubbed each other the wrong way. And goddamn, as bad as Tammy could be, Percy could be an old woman too when he wanted to be about something like, and they could not coexist. And because I was often nominated to be Tammy's handler because she would on some level and at some point listen to me when I talked to her. They were like, she's your creation, Cornette. Then I had to referee, and they knew that me and Percy were friends, so I had to referee between them by calling Percy and then, please stop saying all those horrible things, because he would just blister her at TVs, and she'd get so pissed, and she'd go complain, and she'd fucking say this and that. And I was trying to get a mutual disarmament thing going on. And then I had to listen to when I'd tell Percy, please just, but she did this and that, and I swear. And then I'd go back to Tammy. Well, he said this and that. And whatever he had said was funny as fuck, but she didn't take it that way, right? But anyway, I just heard about this program, and I'm actually looking forward to watching it. That's something else we're either going to have to do a watch-along. I'm going to watch it anyway, if it's on him.
I don't think it's a watch-along, maybe a review. You can't watch along a documentary.
That's what I meant to say, a review, not a watch-along. But I haven't had a lot of sleep. We had a big storm. Have you heard about the big storm we had here last night? Anyway.
You haven't been blown that hard in years.
Boy, I'll tell you. Anyway, Percy Pringle is what we're Paul Bearer. I'm going to watch that program. I'm excited to see what that, but he was just classic. He was classic. And he was old school because he was an old school Southern wrestling fan, but he was able to put himself into that thing because it was so much real to life, or true to life. It was so much was designed around him because he was a mortician. And he would roll his eyes at some of the flights of fancy they took, but he did it for the most part. And there was a lot of things he didn't agree with in the WWE, especially in later years when they got sideways. But he did credit him because they sent him, and he had the weight loss surgery that added years and years to his life. I wish it had been longer. And I wish he hadn't gotten that. That obviously contributed to him not living a long life was being that heavy and that, toll it took on his body or whatever. But anyway, he still loved wrestling, and he would, I'm sure, be shaking his head at a lot of the things, even if people say, oh, well, he was the manager of a mystical undead creature. They still never worked with the Invisible Man in public in front of fans. And if he was here to see some of the things just going on in the last couple of years, I'm sure he would not have been pleased.
All right. Our next question, Jim, sent to CornyDriveThru at gmail.com from Lucas Brock.
That just sounds like a tough guy name. What are you, some kind of tough guy? Lucas Brock?
Is there ever a place for comedy and wrestling? If so, when?
Oh, God. You'll know the moment when you see it. No, yes, there's a place for comedy and wrestling. There always has been. And it's not about when as much as about who and how. that you always, I've said a lot of people didn't understand the Memphis territory because they thought, even some of the people in the business who didn't work there just saw it from the outside because they had a weekly territory. And now that we're seeing a lot of historical research by guys like Scott Teal in Knoxville and Nashville and Amarillo, Texas, and the starting of traditions that we thought were invented by Dory Funk Sr., maybe older than him. It was a West Texas tradition. But you made people believe in your talent and that they were real. And then you had them do sometimes violent things to each other or sometimes humiliating things to each other. Because in weekly territories, in small population centers, in small markets, you had to get repeat business 52 times a year. And you couldn't hospitalize somebody every week. But if you got people mad at the heel, and then the baby face that they believed in did something funny to humiliate the heel, then it was even better sometimes than getting heat in a violent physical way, because you hurt that guy's pride, and then the heel would come back and try to get even and blah, 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 and you'd be off to the races that way. There's room for comedy with the managers. Obviously, if you go back and look at 80s TBS on the network, on that 2-hour Saturday night TBS program, I was the funniest guy, and I was actually one of, give or take, if Paul E. was around, one of 2 or 3 funny people to begin with at all. Nobody else was being funny, which is why it worked. And also it worked because the people believed that I was a prick. The people that were with the business, they knew what I was doing and they were with it fine. But the average fans, they thought that I was a prick. So when I said funny things, I've made this comparison a million times. A joke about somebody's fat wife is funny, but a joke about your particular fat wife ain't funny. When I would say funny things to tear down the baby faces, the people who liked them would be mad at me because I was a smartass, not laughing because I was a comedian. It's context, and it's who's doing it. You can make fun of the baby face, the heel can, without going too close to the bone and revealing his weaknesses. But then in the end, the heel has to get his comeuppance. But the baby face can humiliate the heel and everybody can laugh at him. The fucking, the times that the picture of my mother was revealed and had been replaced by a fat basset hound or whatever. Oh, but then we go out and we try to break the Rock and Roll Express's leg. Or we tarred and feathered Magnum TA on television as a way to humiliate the babyface to force them into giving us a tag team title match. Maybe a few people chuckled, but most people weren't laughing because the way it was treated seriously. It wasn't, and we weren't doing it for laughs. We got death threats over it. Bobby Eaton got his car tarred and feathered over it by the fans. It's who's doing it for what purpose and the context. Sometimes a funny interview is great. And when the managers get into it, or you've got a babyface girl and a heel guy, and they have a fucking fight. There can be humor in all of these things. There can be humor all over the place, but you can't just go out there and just ass off and just make fun of the profession and make fun of the entire program that you're in the middle of when there's supposed to be serious parts of it. You have to do it because it's natural to what's happening at the time, and not because you're trying to be funny and entertaining. I've always said also, if you're sitting in a diner and you look out the window in the wintertime and some old guy with a hat on carrying a bunch of packages slips and falls down, throws all that shit up in the air, and it all comes down on him, and he ends up with a fucking, a sprig of celery on his fucking head and cans stuck up his ass or whatever, you'll laugh. It's funny. But if you look out the window and you see the same guy and he's looking around to make sure somebody's looking at him before he takes the bump on purpose, it ain't funny. You're like, well, that's a dumb son of a bitch. you don't go out trying to be funny first. You go out trying to get the point over first, and then if there's some humor or entertainment to be had in it, and the right person is doing it, and in the right context so that it doesn't look like a hokey fucking set-up deal, then yes, shit can be hilarious. Is that over and above everybody's fucking head? It's simple to me.
Well, again, if you grew up in the modern era, you may not understand that. You've seen a very different style of comedy and wrestling on Monday Night Raw, and everyone copied Raw, and Impact, and TNA before that, and AEW now. A lot of these guys who just think they're naturally hilarious and really want to display it to the world, whether or not it gets them over more, doesn't matter. They want to show everyone how funny they are.
Well, I ain't amused.
All right.
You know what they ought to be spending more time on, Brian?
Then comedy and wrestling?
Then comedy and wrestling?
I can think of a number of things, yes.
Shaving their balls.
That wasn't on top of my list, but yes.
That would be on the list, because if more of these guys shaved their balls instead of thinking up weird, stupid things to do and say, then we'd all be better off, because we wouldn't have to look at their bad comedy and listen to their hokey material, and whoever has to be scuba diving around their nether regions wouldn't have to part through Sherwood Forest to get to Old Maid Marian. One way or the other. I don't know. I just made that up on the spur of the moment. But anyway, folks, if you go to manscaped.com, our friends at Manscaped have everything you need to have the Grand Canyon and the entire Redwood Forest clean shaven, smelling good, not chafed, soft, slick, the whole 9 yards, and smelling good. Did I mention that? Whether it's the new Lawnmower 3.0 trimmer, waterproof, with advanced skin-safe technology, no nicks and cuts. It's even got the LED light, as we mentioned. That's another thing I did this morning. I took a few whacks at a few stray weeds with my Lawnmower 3.0, because even though it was dark, it has the LED light on it. The Weed Whacker ear and nose hair trimmer, that could help you breathe better than ever. You know, when I trimmed the hair in my nose, I found out that I could breathe so much easier because there was so much blockage there from all of that growth. Holy mackerel. And I was going to braid it, but instead I just whacked it away with the Weed Whacker. The Performance Package also includes the Crop Preserver Ball Deodorant, no chafing, and the Crop Reviver Ball Toner keeps the boys fresh. The Crop Mop Ball Wipes. If you're on the go and you don't know when you're going to get around to shower again, but something may happen, just fucking whirl one of those around the melons and you'll be fine. The Foot Duster Foot Deodorant. The Refined Cologne by Manscaped. I'm telling you everything, and they even throw in a travel bag to carry all of your goods. Well, not those goods, but the goods you buy from Manscaped with one of these great packages. They've got everything, folks. Go to manscaped.com and use the code DRIVE, D-R-I-V-E, to get 20% off and free shipping. It's cold weather now. It's getting colder. We're going to be spending time inside more. Don't go into crowded gatherings where you could get sick. Instead, spend more time alone, just you and your balls. Manscaped.com. Code DRIVE, 20% off and free shipping. There you have it.
All right, well, let's get another question here on the show. Here's one that should make you happy.
You act like you don't like to hear me talk about my balls anymore.
You know, I just never know where you're going, and
we used to have some great conversations, you and me, about my balls.
We have never had any conversations about your balls.
We've had many of them here on the air.
It's not the way I recall things.
Well,
but speaking of recall, a lot of people reacted to something we talked about, and I don't know if you actually heard the clip, so I'm going to play it for you.
Oh, boy.
We talked about when Jesse Ventura gave it to Tony Schiavone on commentary at SummerSlam. Did you end up checking out this clip?
Well, I did. Somebody tweeted it. So, yes, I did. I listened to that where he blistered him when Tony said something that was... Actually, now, if Tony said the same thing now, it would pass for common sense because they've changed all the rules. But it was stupid back then.
Well, let's play this, and you can hear this and give your thoughts on the other side.
He's brought all this on himself. with Bobby Heenan pulling the leg, with Andre the Giant trying to choke down the Ultimate Warrior. You got to expect a guy like the Warrior to take matters to his own hands.
And that means out to the floor. Hit him with the belt. This should be a disqualification. That's a disqualification. Where the hell is the referee?
That's outside of the ring, Jesse.
So what?
As much, it can just be a count out here.
What are you going to tell me, Shivani? You can shoot somebody outside the ring as long as it's outside the ring?
Well, no, that...
You know, you're even dumber than Monsoon. I thought Gorilla was the stupidest guy alive.
Right to the head. There is no question that fans are on their feet here.
This is ridiculous that Joey Marella is allowing this to take place in an Intercontinental Heavyweight Championship.
Well, there it is, Jesse Ventura.
There was no question that Tony Schiavone had no idea what to say. Like,
what do you think Vince is thinking? If Vince is in the back on the headset, what is he? I mean, Jesse's mentioning a gun on the air. I mean, no one talks about shooting during a wrestling show for the WWF. What do you think Vince thinks hearing Jesse?
I think they were all laughing at Jesse skewering poor Tony, and Tony being blumfustered and not knowing what to say to come back with, because he did open. Well, it was outside the ring. Well, what difference does that make? That was stupid. So, but we love Tony. We do. We're not blistering him here, but yeah, I think Vince and they were probably laughing because they were, you got him. I got him, pal. And even when I got there in the early 90s, Vince was not the headset Nazi that he came to be, where he was constantly listed. Well, for one thing, he was on the program a lot of times, but he still wasn't constantly listening, constantly micromanaging things that were said and blah, blah, blah. He didn't get that way until the mid 90s and everything started heating up. And then it became, but that does... Here's something, and let's bring this up now and talk about what we're going to do next week on the program. How many of these ridiculous I Quit matches have we seen here lately? Several where they don't even get the idea, the fucking picture of what the match is supposed to be. And I even had some people arguing on Twitter when I said that it was Moxley with the I Quit match with, fuck, who was it?
We saw two back-to-back, Roman Reigns and Jey Uso in Hell in a Cell, and then Moxley and Eddie Kingston.
Kingston, that's right. And I said Moxley came in and with a baseball bat, wrapped in barbed wire no less, and hit Kingston 3 times, and he didn't fucking beat him. Well, what the fuck? I said, then it's ridiculous. And somebody on Twitter said, well, if he'd have... And then I said, and then he took the bat and put it into the guy's face, and he's fucking grinding it, a baseball bat with barbed wire. He's grinding it into his face instead of just hitting him over the head with it, which is stupid. And somebody on Twitter said, well, you don't understand. I obviously don't understand as much about wrestling as you do. No, go ahead and enlighten me. If he'd knocked him out, then he'd be unconscious and he wouldn't be able to say I quit, so he couldn't win the match. And that's so stupid, but then I realized that's what they were telling people in that match with Roman Ruins. Roman Ruins and Jey Uso. Roman Reigns and Jey Uso. They were actually laying there unable to speak, and the announcers said, well, the match can't be over with. This is so stupid. Everybody has lost the plot so bad. The whole idea of an I Quit match is to have a match, a fight with someone that you hate, that you despise, that you have a personal rivalry with, that you want to beat them and do such damage to them with your hands and whatever else is available that they will say, I quit, they've had enough. But it's even better if you knock them out and put them in a fucking coma. Is there in any way, any shape or form, anybody that would think, if you buy the premise of we're going to have a fight until one of us says I quit, that you wouldn't win the match if your opponent was completely unconscious and unable to speak? Brian, am I reaching here in logic? Or was this not even something that didn't even need to be written down before?
Well, again, with the Moxley match, remember that match came out of the fact that he beat Eddie Kingston with the choke. The referee stopped the match, but he never tapped out. He never gave up. He never quit. So that's why they set up that match. So with those terms going into it, I could understand why the fan got in touch with you and said you don't understand. If he knocks him out, if he chokes him out again,
then he's done.
Right back to where we started, where he didn't quit.
No, if he chokes him out again, he's fucking done. He choked him out twice. Get a goddamn new challenger, because I'm not accepting your challenge anymore because I've choked you out. In a real world, this is what would happen. I'm sorry. In the professional wrestling logic world, you can believe two guys are going to have a fight till one of them says, I quit. But it's stretching it too far to say that one of them beats the other guy so fucking bad that he's unconscious, can't get up and can't speak, and the match is not over and I haven't fucking won because that guy's still laying there. No. So what we want to do, this is where I brought this up. Next week, because our drive-through next week is airing all Thanksgiving week long, and it's the anniversary, or it's going to be here very shortly, of Starrcade 85. We're going to do a watch-along and a talk about, I think, the best example on video, at least, of an I Quit match that I know that is available. Tully Blanchard and Magnum TA from Starrcade 85. That epitomized exactly what this whole thing is supposed to be. Two guys that have been through so much, they finally had to go man on man with no rules until one motherfucker said, I quit, I've had enough, I'm done. That's easy to understand.
Well, Tully never said I quit.
Well, but that's the way it was sold, and that's
he said yes, yes, yes.
Well, see, you're spoiling now. You're spoiling the watch along. But it was an answer to the question: do you quit? Yes. But then there's the heel bitch. But anyway, those guys had a fucking war, and it was believable. There wasn't nothing hokey about it. There wasn't nothing fucking funny about it, and it wasn't this stupid. Oh, but he's got to be Okay, so by that logic, if I'm having a fucking I quit match with you and I knock you out and you're unconscious and you can't say I quit, there's no winner, right? Until you come to? Is that where we're going? So then what happens if you have a fucking heart attack and drop down and you're deader than Kelsey's nuts? Right there on the ground, graveyard dead, right there on the ground. Does that mean that the match never ends?
Means your heart quit.
He didn't say it, though. I didn't hear it. I didn't hear, oh, quit. I heard, but I didn't hear, oh, quit.
And by the way, on the topic of next week's show, we should mention also, because we're going to review Survivor Series, it'll be out on Tuesday, not Monday.
That's right. Another one of these things is coming up. For all the people who say that we just blister and malign and torment and harass and pester and nettle AEW all the time, the WWE is going to have another chance to offend us with their presentation. We're going to watch that next week and talk about that, right?
That's right. And
Survivor Series, where I give you a high five if I can survive.
I'm sure you saw that apparently at the Survivor Series, it will be The Undertaker's last match.
Okay, I did not see this. I haven't seen, if it wasn't on NXT, I didn't see it relating to the WWE. I thought he had his last match previously. The match. So what's going on?
I'm looking for this now because that's what I saw. And again, I don't watch their stupid shows, so I have no idea either.
Well, now you don't have to just casually disregard their stupid show.
Their shows are awful.
I didn't say they weren't.
Horrible.
I didn't say they were any good. You just don't have to be so cavalier about it. They're stupid shows.
I don't think it's cavalier. It's stating a factual statement.
You had a very off-putting tone in your voice when you said it.
Several WWE returns confirmed for Undertaker's final farewell at Survivor Series. Maybe it's not a match. Maybe he's coming out to wave goodbye to all the fans.
Well, I heard that they were I heard that they were doing some type of a 30-year farewell thing, but I didn't hear it was going to be a match, and I would doubt very seriously if it is. And they're bringing back some of his old friends and rivals and important people in that atmosphere. They should. Well, if you can advertise Undertaker coming out to take a shit versus whatever they got going on now, that's probably a plus for him business-wise.
Yeah, I'm looking at the lineup. Here's the lineup for the Survivor Series as of now, and I do not see The Undertaker listed here. Match 1, Team Raw versus Team SmackDown. Raw being comprised of AJ Styles, Keith Lee, Sheamus, Braun Strowman, and Riddle.
Oh, fuck.
Team SmackDown being Kevin Owens, Jey Uso, King Corbin, Seth Rollins, and a wrestler to be determined.
Jesus Christ, I'd like to determine who said that several of those other people you mentioned were wrestlers.
Match 2, another Team Raw, Team SmackDown match from Team Raw, Nia Jax, Shayna Baszler, Mandy Rose, Dana Brooke, and Lana versus Team SmackDown of Bianca Belair, Ruby Riott, Liv Morgan, and 2 members to be determined later.
So we know we can fast forward that one.
No, you have to watch that. Because there are several people in there who are not very good in the ring. I really want you to watch that.
All right.
And actually, I don't even know if Mandy Rose will be in it, because I think what did she do? She break her arm, break her wrist? She just got hurt last week on TV. Match 3, Bobby Lashley, the United States Champion on Raw, versus Sami Zayn, the Intercontinental Champion on SmackDown. Match 4. Match 4, The New Day, comprised of Kofi Kingston and Xavier Woods, the Raw Tag Team Champions, versus the Street Profits, Angelo Dawkins and Montez Ford, the current SmackDown Tag Team Champions.
Can we fast forward that one?
Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
All right.
Can't fast forward the next one. Match 5, Champion versus Champion, although non-title. The Raw Women's Champion, Asuka, versus SmackDown's Women's Champion, Sasha Banks.
Oh, come on. They already had a girls' match.
No, you have to watch it. You can't just dismiss all the girls' matches, and you can't just dismiss any girls' match that has a Japanese wrestler.
If they want us to watch the girls' match, why did they just have one then? I've already watched one. Now I got to watch another one of the Japanese schoolgirls?
She's not... See, again, every Japanese women's wrestler is not a schoolgirl.
All I can think of is Riho and that fat Freddie Mercury-looking twat with the mustache.
Emi Sakura, there is no comparison between Riho, Emi Sakura, and Asuka. No comparison. There's no... The gimmicks are completely different.
Are there going to be any subtitles?
I don't think so.
It's like watching a French foreign film and not even one with any sex.
See, now you're talking about Io Shirai.
Well, see?
When did you decide to hate Japanese women wrestling?
When they showed me 15 of them on every program and tried to shove them down my throat, beating 250-pound fucking women and men.
You never liked All Japan Women's Wrestling?
Not that I was going to sit down and just salivate on like I was waiting for the latest fucking 30-minute Broadway between Terry Funk and Jumbo Tsuruta.
You didn't like Lioness Asuka?
She was all right.
Shigasa Nagayo?
She was all right.
Dump Matsumoto?
Teeth were a little sharp, but no.
What?
No, looky here. I'm not saying that the All Japan women were not better wrestlers than at the time than we had in the United States. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that neither one of them were going to draw any money. If they'd had All Japan women in the United States in the 80s, it wouldn't have drawn any money either. And women's wrestling in the 80s didn't draw any money. Women's wrestling today draws money. But they got way too many of them doing it. It dilutes the gene pool. And honest and truthfully, I've seen enough Japanese women wrestlers from these companies. It seems like everyone's got 6 of them. Give me another couple of Rhea Ripleys if you're going to fucking duplicate and populate your roster with the same people.
There aren't more Rhea Ripleys.
Well, there you go. That's another reason why she's a star, baby. But there's 16 Japanese women's wrestlers. And all of them have a belt.
NXT has one.
Which one? I can't remember.
Io Shirai.
Ah, well, there you go. We got to watch her.
Raw has one. Asuka. AEW, we haven't seen any Japanese women wrestlers in AEW in quite a while, other than Hikaru Shida. Now, early on...
They had 4 or 5, didn't they?
Early on, they certainly had several.
Yeah.
And then the pandemic hit, and Rio had to go back to school. The final match on Survivor Series, champion versus champion non-title. It'll be either Randy Orton or Drew McIntyre, one of who will be the Raw WWE champion. I guess they're having a match before this, I don't know when, versus Roman Reigns, the SmackDown Universal Champion, with Paul Heyman.
But wait, that's the entire card?
6 matches.
They got every single one of their stars is on Survivor Series.
We haven't watched everything, but we've seen some of the big pay-per-views. It's become quite apparent there aren't that many stars in WWE anymore. The biggest stars in WWE are still Undertaker and John Cena. And
no wonder they needed Undertaker to bid his final farewell. He may go on one of those fucking Onita farewell tours that last 5 years or so. With that lineup, I would actually take for that main event. Either combination would probably be good, but so we'll watch that. But holy shit,
Jim, would you like to take any bets on who do you think will win the champion versus champion non-title main event?
I would not, because I don't know what kind of screwy stuff they might do, but I know who would. Our friends at MyBookie. Thank you, Brian Last, for that tag, folks. I don't know if they're even taking bets on the WWE anymore because, you know, sometimes these matches are predetermined. However, what's not predetermined is how much money that you can win. There is no limit. If you have the right picks, whether it's late fall college ball, the NBA bubble, UFC Fight Island, Dana White, that no good right-wing Republican son of a gun's got his fighters out on an island somewhere in the middle of the ocean. So they can't get to COVID, but they're fighting. Folks, no matter what it is, you can get some skin in the game with MyBookie, where odds boost, lightning deals, and free bets await all season long. And Thanksgiving's coming up. You know the NFL is going to be playing some turkeys. Whether you're a first-time customer or you've been playing with MyBookie for years, there's no shortage of value to be found in the thousands of game lines, unique prop bets, and contests that they offer every single week. And you can sign up or get reloaded today. And everybody wants to get reloaded. Find an edge, make your bet, and get paid. They've even got the full-fledged casino platform with all the classic table, slot, and card games. You can win a bunch of money. Hopefully you won't lose a bunch of money. Some plates do go down in value, but MyBookie never closes its doors, so you can continue to build your bankroll back up even after the stadium lights have gone out. Who writes this stuff? Make the right play today and sign up today at MyBookie and use promo code DRIVE, D-R-I-V-E, to get your deposit matched halfway all the way up to $1,000. You put in $200, they give you another $100. Holy mackerel, all the way up to $1,000. It's free betting money. So it's winning season at MyBookie. Come join in on the fun and win some cash while you're at it.
Well, Jim, let's get some more questions here on the drive-thru. This one was sent in to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Roar in Oslo, Norway.
Roar?
Roar. R-O-
How do you spell that?
R-O-A-R. Roar.
Well, roar back. Roar. They're great.
Hello to the... Is that Ann Harold Garger that you just did?
That what?
They're great.
Did you just have a stroke?
They're great. Bon Hepper Trepper.
Von Hepper Trepper. Lee Marshall.
Annie Mae Henny. But let's get this question here.
All right.
Hello to the Fred Allen and Jack Benny of the podcasting world. I have a soft spot.
Fred Allen did a routine one time on his show. He had the greatest morning line I've ever heard. He just woken up. He said, I feel like a sandhog just pulled his foot out of my mouth.
I have a soft spot for Plowboy Frazier. And there's an interview from the 1970s on YouTube with Lance Russell and Plowboy for an upcoming hair versus hair match in Louisville, Kentucky between Plowboy Frazier and Jerry Lawler.
Where is that interview at?
On YouTube, apparently.
Oh my God.
I will.
That's one that I do not have in my collection.
I will see if I can find it while we talk about this.
I was at that match.
Well, that's the question. Was Jim there?
Yes.
Who won this epic hair versus hair match? And what is Jim's favorite hair versus hair match?
Well, Lawler won it. Surprise, surprise. Lawler and Plowboy Frazier had been a heel tag team. Lawler was the top heel, and Lawler as a person liked Frazier. He had a soft spot for him. He'd bring him in all the time and did all the different gimmicks with him, and it got kind of silly at the end. He was Kamala #2, and he was the Lone Ranger. He lost to Loser Leave Town and came back under a mask. Here's Plowboy Frazier, 7 feet tall, 425 pounds, wearing a fucking Lone Ranger mask and a little cowboy hat. But back then, Frazier could still go somewhat. There were things that he could do well, and he could be impressive if he had a heel to bump off of him. Anyway, Lawler had brought Frazier in as his big, giant, stooge, flunky partner, and everybody put Frazier over and bounced off of him. And he was huge. He was really big. He wasn't very athletic, and he always wanted to run with Andre that he never got because he wasn't that good of a worker, and Vince Sr. didn't want anybody near Andre's size in the ring with him to begin with. But when Lawler brought him in, anyway, they made him a beast, right? But and Sam Bass was their manager, and Lawler was doing the thing where he'd always take advantage of him, kind of make fun of him sideways. And this led to finally Jerry Jarrett's favorite angle that he ever did on Memphis television, where Lawler had been bragging about all the things he was buying Frazier and all the things he was done for him. And see, I bought him these nice diamond rings. And Frazier'd show him off all the diamonds he had and everything, because Frazier's from Philadelphia, Mississippi, and he's just a country plowboy. And he would tell Lance Russell, yeah, Lawler, he took me out last week and bought me a steak. Well, it was a hamburger steak, and it was good. And all that kind of shit. Jerry Jarrett comes out and says, Frazier, come here, just talk to me for a minute. I just want to talk to you. The things that Lawler's doing to you and he's saying, to you, they're just not true. He's messing your head up. And those rings, I guarantee those rings are not real. He's just taking advantage of you. And here, give me one of those rings. Well, just give me, let me show you. And he takes a hammer and they sit down on the floor in the studio. The whole show's come to a halt. And all the fans are enraptured in this, right? And Jarrett is going to take the hammer and break the diamond ring and show him that it's all just glass and glue and whatever. And the first time he hits the diamond, it skitters off under the ring and doesn't break. So he's got to go grab it and bring it back. It's live TV, and then he breaks the diamond, right? It just goes into powder. And Frazier's like, you broke it. And then Jerry Jarrett's saying, that's what I'm telling you. He's giving you phony stuff. He's taking your money. He's taking advantage of you. And here comes Lawler out, and he's fucking hot. But that's enough. They do the breakup. And now Frazier's a babyface. And now, God, he's going to get even, because Lawler's been taking advantage of him. And now everybody, this was really the best run in Memphis that Frazier ever had. He was a top babyface working with Jerry Lawler for several weeks in a row, teaming up with the other babyfaces. And the people really liked him because he was a big country fuck that, like, everybody knew somebody like that, just not quite that big. And Lawler knew how to work with Frazier. He'd have Frazier shoot him into the turnbuckle, and because normally if Lawler was going to take a backdrop, he'd get shot in the ropes. But Frazier was so strong, he'd shoot him in the turnbuckles, and he'd bounce out of that, and he'd take a backdrop off Frazier. All Frazier had to do was stand up, and Lawler was 8 feet in the air. He'd fly all the way across the fucking ring, boom, and he'd sell that for fucking ever. And the people would be screaming for Frazier to get him. And so they had some pretty good matches, and it was fucking impressive. And but finally, Lawler had to go over in the end because he's going to go, at that point, he was fixing to go into some, I think, a Southern title program with Tommy Rich about that time. So he's going to go over in the end. And they didn't do it in Memphis, but to juice up business, they shaved Frazier's head in Louisville to give Louisville a hair match. And I could go and run and find my notes, and it would take 20 minutes. But some way or another, Lawler fucked him with a foreign object and beat him, and they shaved his head. And people felt sorry for him because he had to get his head shaved. So I remember as he had his head down and he's walking back, everybody's reaching up and patting him on the shoulders. It's okay. It's okay. And he's kind of crying like, I'm so embarrassed.
Here's the promo. I found the promo.
Go ahead. Yeah, there you go.
It's about a minute and a half. Let's hear this.
In Louisville, Kentucky, and that is one where you and Jerry Lawler, Plowboy, are going to be in there with hair against hair. There has got to be somebody's hair to go in the match in there. Is this the way you want it?
That's the way I want it. That's the way I asked for it, and that's the way it's booked. Jerry Lawler's going to look funny, run around Memphis, run around Louisville, run around everywhere, run that smart mouth with bald head. Well, he's going to be bald-headed, so he ain't going to cut my hair, but somebody's going to lose their hair that night. Right here in Louisville, Kentucky.
Well, the situation is, and I know Lawler is very proud of that curly locks of his up in there, and that would, I guess, give you a lot of satisfaction to be able to take it off from him.
That's right. Remember, Lance, when I used to be his partner, I had to walk around and carry his bag, his hair dryer, and his brush and all that stuff, and I had to dry his hair up in the dressing room. Well, people don't know about all that, but neighbor, Mr. Jerry Lawler, bring your scissors, bring your clippers, because you're going to need it.
He is sitting in a situation where he has put his hair up, and this is the first time I can ever remember Lawler putting his hair up, and he's doing it against a guy that I just can't believe, the big Plowboy Frazier, a guy who has given him nothing but trouble since you parted with Jerry.
Well, everybody in Louisville seen he busted my head 2 weeks ago. Well, Mr. Jerry Lawler, you're going to get your head busted, plus you're going to get it shaved, too.
Well, you know for a fact that somebody's going to get it shaved.
Somebody's going to lose their hair, right.
Okay.
That's right.
Plowboy Frazier says he's ready for it. He's going to put Jerry Lawler right in there in a bald category in there. Is Plowboy Frazier and Jerry Lawler going a hair against hair? Absolutely somebody must lose it in there. We'll see in Louisville.
Frazier was a scintillating promo, too. Lance had to do half the thing for him. And that was, I remember it was shot in Memphis because that's where they did all the promos. They were probably standing in front of a white brick wall, weren't they? Brian.
Yes, they were.
Yes, they were, because they did it in one of the corner locker rooms in the Mid-South Coliseum is where they would do the local promos. And but that was Frazier, and he sounded legitimate and tongue-tied because every dumb country fuck that everybody knew would have been tongue-tied in that situation. And then, if you pushed him and he could do that leg drop, and still in the mid-70s, he could get fucking height. By the 80s, it was over with. One night in Memphis in 83, he would always back up a step, and then he'd take a step forward, and he'd throw that right leg out in the air, and he would come up off the ground, and he'd go, yee, and boom, and drop that big leg. That was his finish, right? And that was the most impressive thing he did. And in the 70s, he could get up there, right, for a guy that size and look like that. But by the 80s, it was over with. And one night in the ring in Memphis was bouncy anyway. And he had slammed a guy and backed up to fucking take that step back and then take that step forward and throw that leg up. And some way the ring, somebody else took a bump behind him or something, having the ring was still bouncing. And he threw that right leg up in the air and went, yee, and just fell straight over backwards. Boom. He would call you neighbor. He did the neighbor thing, right? Well, that's right, neighbor. And he did that in the locker room, too. And he sat down when I first got into business. We're in Tupelo, Mississippi, at the Tupelo Sports Arena. That was a paint and body shop in a previous life. And they had put the dressing rooms up with basically like mortar board and fucking plywood. One night they had a big brawl back to the locker room. It wasn't even the Tupelo concession stand brawl. It was just a big fight to the locker room, and they knocked the fucking wall down, and there was Eddie Marlin in the shower. But anyway, he's in the heel locker room with me one night. He sits down on the bench next to me, and he takes this giant mason jar of what looked like piss, a giant urine specimen, just a jar of piss. He took it out of his bag, and he unscrewed the cap a little bit. He had it kind of gimmicked, like we used to when you'd catch lightning bugs when you were a kid. You'd poke some holes for air in the fucking top of the lid. He had it gimmicked. He unscrewed it a little bit and shook some of this in his hand and started patting it up under his mud flaps, up under his arms. I'm like, Frazier, what are you doing? He said, neighbor, so I buy my cologne by the gallon. It's cheaper that way. What do you say to that? He had at one point a shoe and Frazier Shoes and Clothes was his store down in Pascagoula, Mississippi. And he'd give out his business cards and he'd try to sell boots to the boys that would probably fall apart, I mean, like cowboy boots and shit. And he did a big business in costume jewelry, the shit that would really turn you green. But he did all kinds of that shit. He always had something for sale or something going on.
A lot of fans would know him best from his WWF run as Uncle Elmer. But what I'm fascinated by is when he was the Convict. I mean, he got to go to Japan as the Convict.
Yeah.
And he wrestled in L.A. as the Convict. How did he get discovered? He's from Mississippi. He's working the Tennessee territory. How did he end up over there?
I don't know the exact route that he took to Los Angeles. He started he was from Mississippi and he started on independent shows down there. And he was first used in the Memphis territory. They called him Ed Younger in probably 67, 68, around about the time that he got a spot in Los Angeles. And Hoss Younger was another name. And they brought him in and he was kind of a gimmick because I can't imagine. I saw him in the 70s when he'd been in the business for a while and he'd learned to throw a punch and he dropped the leg and he had the basic, premise of how to sell. When he was a babyface, he'd go down to a knee a lot and he could take a bump if you hit him with a gimmick where it was the goddamnest bump I've ever seen where his legs would just fly up kind of cross-legged in the air and he'd just collapse all at the same time. I don't know what the fuck, but he got by with it because he was so huge. I assume that when they first found him and brought him into Memphis that he was seen by somebody that went to Los Angeles or there was some connection or somehow because they got the idea to put a mask on him and he was supposedly a convict from a road gang that had escaped or was an ex-prisoner or whatever, and nobody knew who he was legitimately because nobody knew who the fuck he was. But suddenly a 7-foot, 400-pound guy, and this was before all of his weight was in his stomach. And as I said, when he was still, under 30, he could probably move. So he wasn't a great worker, but you could see where you could make an attraction out of a guy like that in that territory. And Los Angeles was a stopover for everybody going to Japan and coming back. So with their fetish for giant Americans and or, white foreigners, think the great Antonio, for fuck's sake. He got booked years after that. I can see where he was a natural for that gimmick and the way that they could push it and make people scared of him. But it's also very telling that did the Convict ever go back, or did the Convict did his tours of Japan end when the run in Los Angeles ended? Did he ever do the Convict again anywhere?
I don't think so. Remember too, when he went to Japan as a Convict, he had Pampero Firpo as his handler.
Yeah, boy, when Pampero Firpo had to be the guy to lead you around and make sure that everything was okay, you knew you were in fucking danger. But yeah, and that's kind of telling that, I can understand Los Angeles not bringing him back, but at Japan, the fact that they didn't bring him back indicates that they liked the gimmick in a 8x10 still better than they did in the ring when they saw it.
So Jim Cornette, 1985. You're working in Dallas. Someone says to you, hey, did you hear Vince just signed Stan Frazier?
Yes.
What are you thinking?
We were that was the one that blew everybody's mind from Tennessee. And in some cases, especially some of the guys that had been in Tennessee and still weren't making very much money were like, what the fuck? Frazier? Frazier's going to, but think about who was there, who had just got there. Jimmy Hart, Randy Savage. And there was the Memphis connection there and Hart had worked with Frazier for years because Hart was was Lawler's manager when he first got started, and Lawler was always bringing Frazier in, and Hart had known Frazier before then. So, and Hillbilly Jim, because Jim had just finished a run in Memphis as Harley Davidson, and so when they got Hillbilly Jim and they wanted to have a hillbilly family because Vince was recreating the Scufflin' Hillbillies from the late 50s that were such a hit in Madison Square Garden and in the Northeast. That's why he was always fixated on hillbillies, the Godwins, etc. Because when he was a kid, there were the Graham brothers, you know, famous adversaries, and another tag team from his childhood. But you've got Hillbilly Jim. Fuck, if you need another hillbilly, the first thing that anybody would have said was the most legitimate real hillbilly we fucking know also happens to be 7 feet tall and 400 and something pounds. And then Vince would go, what? And then there you go. So when you examined it, it made perfect sense. But meanwhile, everybody's like, what the fuck, Plowboy? And then when he got married I think that was a real wedding too. Because this was years after he showed me those Polaroids of him and the midget. God. Whew, boy, it looked like a growth, actually.
I don't need to hear any more details about
all right.
Uncle Elmer and a midget.
A growth on his lap is what it looked like.
To the second part of this question, your favorite hair versus hair match?
Definitely not the one that I was involved in. You know, I'm trying to think of one that really came off well, did everything it was supposed to do. Nobody had a riot. The Clippers worked. I think probably the most impactful that I ever, you know, at least I didn't witness as a fan, but we saw the fallout as a fan was when Lawler shaved Dundee's head. And then the next week in Memphis shaved his wife's head. We didn't know about that. The wife was until much later on when I got pen pals in Memphis. That was not told anywhere else in the rest of the territory, but we saw Dundee's when he showed up bald. And that was a huge shock. Tell me a famous haircut I was there for in person, because I don't remember a lot of them.
I can't think of too many other, maybe Jimmy Valiant. I don't know if you were there in person for that.
Oh, God, yes, that's right, when they shaved for Crockett, right?
He lost his beard, and then he lost his hair.
Yeah.
And then he put up Big Mama's hair, but he won that one.
Yes, well, and that was an angle they stole from Memphis. But, you know, I don't know that I have a favorite one, because, you know, that's the one we've always tried to do screwy things with, you know, and sometimes those things don't work out. They set the seats on fire when Lawler and Valiant went to the no contest. Lawler was convinced that people wouldn't want to see him get his hair cut, so he had Valiant attack him before the match and lay him out. And they were going to bring something back next week, and the people were hot. They didn't get his fucking hair cut, and they set the seats on fire. And I did the one in Smoky Mountain where it was Tammy's hair against Riggy Morton's hair. And I thought, well, if Riggy Morton gets fucked, but then he comes back and shaves Candido's head, they'll be happy. But they didn't want to see Riggy Morton get his hair cut, but they didn't like what we gave him either. So they were kind of pissed about that.
I was there for that one.
Yes, that's right. You were, as a matter of fact. But it didn't get to the point where when the thing with Lawler and Valiant happened, Jerry Jarrett was running back in the back asking Dundee, Bill, you want, and Bill's like, fuck you, I told you it wouldn't work.
I guess Lawler, when he lost his hair finally to Idol and Tommy Rich and Heyman.
Yeah, I would have loved to have been there that night. And God damn it, you know, I'm not going to slag off on Paul E. too bad, but goddamn, I could have got so much more out of that. And he was proud of that angle and the fucking heat that it got and the riot that they caused and everything until he wouldn't do the fucking blow off and take the bump off the scaffold after he said he would. And that's why they fired him. But boy, I could have had some fun with that one.
Well, he's also taken a little bit more credit for that than he deserves. It was really Idol and Rich. He was.
Well, yeah, he was their manager. Oh, yeah. But, well, yeah. If you listen to Paul when it initially happened, he was in the midst of planting the flag at Iwo Jima and cutting his way through a wall of human flesh with a fucking Bowie knife. But no, Paul wouldn't have made it in Louisiana for 3 weeks. I do have to say that. But nevertheless, I would have had fun with that angle.
The photos that would come out of California always looked great. Like when John Tolis lost his hair, when Roddy Piper lost his hair.
Yeah.
You know, Jimmy Lennon standing there while they're cutting the hair. It looks so cool.
See, that's the thing, is that in Los Angeles, they, especially that territory, they made the hair matches mean something, and they showcased them with the top guys, and they did them right because of the lucha influence, because hair and mass matches were always big in lucha. So they did them well there, and they featured that. That would be like maybe the hair match was LA's Texas Death Match. It was more suitable to that territory. And so, and especially with the money they drew off of those angles with Blassie and Tolos and all those guys. But the hair in Tennessee worked too. It's just that then we all started getting creative with it. But the first sellout of the Mid-South Coliseum for wrestling in 1972 was the Jackie Fargo and Al Green hair match, where it was Fargo's hair against, I believe, Al Green and his brother Don and Sir Clements, everybody leaving town, I think, because Al Green didn't have a lot of hair even then. The point is, they shaved Fargo's head because they gave a stipulation that the people thought Jackie Fargo has to win this. He'll finally get revenge on Al Green for calling Jackie's father a drunk and saying he died broke and all that shit. Oh, it was Dave Brown to this day can recite Jackie Fargo's interview where he rebutted all the things that Al Green said about his father. But anyway, that angle in 72 drew huge money everywhere, and they ended up going to the Coliseum, Fargo's hair up. People thought, no way Fargo's losing. This is the tip. He's going to get even with that fucking Al Green, and Al Green beat him 2 out of 3 because Fargo, they stopped it. He was bleeding too bad. He couldn't continue, and he had to sit there. This is the oldest Memphis match that's still on tape. And I've got a copy of it. And Fargo had to sit there in the chair, and they brought the barber in and the whole 9 yards, and the people were crying. But then they got more life out of the fucking program with Fargo and the Greens. So anyway, that was a spectacle to see, because it was like really, even though it was 1972, it was really old-fashioned Southern wrestling style fight. You know, Fargo's fucking taking the real shots in the fucking face. He threw those beautiful punches. Al Green's got fists the size of canned hams. And they just punched and body slammed each other for 3 fucking falls. They were both bleeding and busted up, and it looks like an old boxing film. People are going berserk.
All right, our next question, Jim,
Did I answer that question?
I think so. I think that was a really good answer for once. This next one.
Good answer. Thank you. Thank you for 50 points now.
This next one was sent in on Twitter using a hashtag CornyDriveThru from Grant Cameron. Did Dusty want Rick Steiner to beat Ric Flair at Starrcade 88 in under 4 minutes? Did Flair go over Dusty's head and get it changed? Did this lead to Dusty no-showing a house show in D.C. soon after in protest? Did any of this happen?
Well, it's been reported, has it not, that Dusty was getting grumpy, and Dusty and Flair were getting grumpy with each other, and Dusty wanted to make Flair and Rick Steiner the match at Starrcade 88 because he wanted to push Steiner and make him a top gimmick babyface.
Well, was it that, or was he wanted to show Ric Flair who the boss was?
Well, and he wanted to show Ric Flair who the boss was. But I'm trying to think who took it to that. Was that when Herd was first becoming involved, or was that before Herd?
I think it was before Herd, because Starrcade 88 would have been December. That's
right. What happened was that Jim Crockett was the interim booker when they fired Dusty right about this time and over some of this. Turner had just bought the company, and one of the primary reasons was because of all the wrestlers. Ted Turner knew Ric Flair, knew who he was, and knew him, had met him, and in some of the photo ops that Turner would occasionally, pop up for. And that's kind of why they bought the thing. Well, now Rick and Dusty are mad at each other, and Dusty wants to show him who's boss. And Dusty's also concerned because Turner's just bought the company. He wants to continue as booker. That's why he turned the Road Warriors and put himself in an angle with them. That's why he had heated up some other stuff. He'd got everything to where he thought that it would be to draw some money to show them that, he was doing his thing. But several things started backfiring. They didn't like the people did not want to boo the Road Warriors, whether they were heels or not. The spike in the eye got fucking heat on Dusty, which was like just a couple of weeks or maybe even a week after I had bled buckets. And they said they didn't want any more juice. So what Dusty did was turn around and get juice himself by having the Road Warriors stick a spike in his fucking eye. So that wasn't good. And some way, and I'm trying to remember the chain of the information of whether it was through Jim Crockett or whatever the case, Turner Broadcasting made the choice there to fire Dusty as the booker, but keep him as a talent. And that's when they named Jim Crockett as the interim booker until they could find a new one, because by that point they knew that Jim Herd was coming in, and they figured, well, fuck, we'll search for another booker, which that ended up with George Scott. So we know how that turned out. So the point is, I don't remember Dusty no-showing a house show in Washington and protest over that. It may have been when they told him they removed him as booker, but did he even no-show one? I can't remember. Because that's the point in time where Turner Broadcasting was trying to save on plane tickets and not flying me and Heyman to the fucking house shows. Remember that?
That's right.
So I may not have been there to know whether he no-showed either, because they'd already mandatory no-showed me and Paulie. So I don't know. It was a mess.
Now, Steiner ends up winning the TV title from Mike Rotunda at Starrcade. And that was obviously the program that had been set up for a long time, with them being in the Varsity Club. How do you think it would have gone over if all of a sudden, instead of that, you don't go to the Steiner-Rotunda match, you go to Steiner versus Ric Flair, and he beats Flair in under 4 minutes?
Well, I've also heard that I don't think that would have been the case, regardless of whether they'd had the match or not. I think that's been romanticized, because I don't remember anybody else ever, Dusty having an idea for anybody else ever doing a 4-minute world title match, regardless of the finish. Has that not always sounded a little fucking dodgy to you?
Yes and no. Knowing the dynamics behind the scenes at that point, Flair was really unhappy with Dusty. Arn and Tully had been unhappy with Dusty and they left, so now Flair doesn't even have them there. I could see Ric Flair and Dusty, they always had a love-hate relationship. Again, I know in the later years before Dusty passed, they loved each other and they were great.
Yeah.
But look at 1991 where Flair left the company. Talked to people who were in Baltimore. They said Dusty was at the bar celebrating that he wouldn't have to deal with Flair anymore. So, I think I could see Dusty at that period of time, who was, again, he just did that Road Warrior angle, which didn't work and also got him in trouble. I could see him maybe thinking about showing Ric Flair who the boss was.
I can see the statement being made out loud that, well, baby, if he don't want to do the job for him, Steiner could beat him in about 4 minutes. I can see something like that, and then it being taken and run away with. But regardless, I think the people obviously would have cheered and loved it if Rick Steiner had beaten Ric Flair on pay-per-view for the world title. But
how would they have reacted in Baltimore? You think they would have reacted positively to that?
I think they honestly would. People remember Steiner, the dog-faced gremlin. He was one of the more popular fucking people,
absolutely,
babyface or heel, in the company, and Kevin Sullivan especially did a masterful job with that, because that's what they were going for. He was an updated Plowboy Frazier. But this time he was a lovable guy who happened to be a legitimate shooter who was being treated as a flunky because he was mentally deficient in some respect, but the people liked him, and the more that Sullivan mistreated him, the more they wanted to see that. And finally, a lot of people forget, when the Steiner brothers first got together, Rick Steiner was the star and Scott was the little brother.
We just talked about that on the Observer Hall of Fame special that comes out this week, because I voted for the Steiner brothers for the Hall of Fame. Again, I look at...
Wait a minute, the Steiner brothers are not even in the Wrestling Hall of Fame, but Twinkle Toes McFingerbang is a first ballot Hall of Famer.
The Steiner brothers aren't, but I think going back now, they look even more impressive when you go watch them. And that was one of the points I brought up was Scott came in, he was just Rick's little brother.
Yeah.
And then really quickly, it was like, oh my God, this guy's doing revolutionary stuff we've never seen before. And they became, in the ring, one of the most dynamic tag teams of all time for 5 years.
Yeah, so, I mean, the people would have liked it, whether it's Baltimore or not, because Steiner was over. Whether it would have been the right thing for business is another decision, because Steiner had not been portrayed in that spot, but yet, by the same token, they with the exception of the in-ring quality of 1989, when Flair ended up with the book, having the trilogy with Steamboat, doing the thing with Funk, etc., business was never as good as it was for WCW when they bought it, as it was when they bought it for Crockett for another 6 fucking years. So it couldn't have been too much worse than what they ended up doing, except it wouldn't have given us that big year of 89 with all those great matches and Flair somewhat bringing it back around. But Rick Steiner as world champion in 1992 would probably look better than what they were doing in front of no people in empty buildings.
Couple more questions this week, Jim. Our next one was sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from The Evil Sins. Hey, Jim, hopefully this email reaches you.
Is that plural?
There's no real name. I'm reading the name from the heading line. It says The Evil Sins. What is your opinion of Carlito as a wrestler and as a person?
Well, Carlito spent some time here in OVW, and he's obviously Carlos Colon's son, second-generation guy. And I'll say the same thing I always said to The Office whenever they'd ask me a report on him. Carlito's a very good wrestler whenever he wants to be. When he looks like he's trying hard and he gives a shit, he's very good. Otherwise, it looks like he's coasting because he's a son of a superstar in his universe, and now he's been signed and sent here to developmental, and he probably thinks he ought to be on the main roster because he'd have a good match every once in a while. I don't know whether it's dependent on if he liked who he was working with or just was in a good mood. And then next 2 or 3 would just be, eh. And so I said, he's very good when he wants to be. And he probably doesn't want to be here because he's the son of a wrestling legend and he wants to go to the main roster. And that's pretty much how it turned out. But then I think he got up there and found out that he wasn't really going to be the fucking top guy in the history of the business, which I'm not sure that he was aware of that before he got there, that they weren't going to use him as a just top main event guy. And that's probably why he didn't last real long up there. But I haven't seen him in 20 fucking years and never had any arguments with him. I wasn't that impressed because while he was here, he was just coasting, and I didn't watch any of his WWE stuff because I wasn't watching any WWE at that point.
Got another question about hair. This was sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Frank Dose. I've always been curious about, with busy travel schedules in the territory days, how wrestlers maintain their perms and bleach jobs. Was it common to see Harley Race driving around in curlers? Was there a certain wrestler or wrestlers who specialized in doing other wrestlers' hair for extra cash?
No. No, there wasn't. Your wife, your girlfriend, or one of the accommodating rats. That's pretty much it. I don't think that any of the guys, if they did have time, would have been seen in a, as my mother used to call them, a beauty shop, unless it was run by somebody that they were being intimate with or whatever. And usually that's what the guys' wives or girlfriends or an accommodating girlfriend would bleach their hair or do whatever. I never had to go through all of that myself, thankfully, but in my experience in managing blonde people, or bleach blonde people at least, that's what would happen.
Nothing with Harley Race driving around in
no, there's that would, to the best of my recollection, that would never have taken place anyway. I would assume, BJ did Harley's hair, because Harley Race ain't going to ever have it be out in public in curlers. I would think not.
Do you think he should have gotten a perm? I mean, do you think Harley Race in the early 80s as NWA champion would have looked better in that time if he had the same haircut he had earlier instead of the Robert Brady, perm?
Trying to be more modern.
Yeah.
I always thought it looked a bit much on Harley, but who's going to tell him? Right?
Someone had to. Someone had to say something. Harley, what are you doing?
Well, I don't know. Lawler had one for that 1 week. We've told that story. I went the first day that the Freebirds debuted on television. I happened to be in the studio because that was the WFIA fans convention that weekend in Memphis. And Lawler comes out and gets in the ring, and he's got a curly perm. He looked like Mike Brady. And some of the fans in the studio were giggling, and I think, the only pictures that exist. I've got a couple around here, but I was like, what the fuck has he done? And I'm not going to say that right at that point, but I was like, it made his head look like a basketball. He had no goatee because he was a baby face. And that accentuated a chin issue when his weight would creep up. And the fucking curly perm, his head looked like a basketball. And apparently a bunch of people told Lawler, because after that Monday night, by the time I saw him again in Louisville, his hair had been fried, dyed, and laid to the side, as Butch Reed would say. It was so straight. It looked like somebody had taken an ironing board to it. It took his hair. He looked like a CPA after that. It was just so straight and flat and parted on the side because that's what they had to do to get that curl out of it. And it took 3 or 4 months for his fucking hair to look right again.
Our next question, Jim, sent to CornyDriveThru at gmail.com from Robbie. Dear Mr. Cornette, big fan of the show. I know that you are a fan of Big Bubba, Ray Traylor, and I would probably be the biggest fan of his to ever email you. I have heard just before he sadly passed away in 2004, there were plans to bring him back as his old Big Boss Man blue shirt character. Do you know whether this was true? Also, any other Ray Traylor stories would be appreciated.
God, I don't know whether there were plans or not. Honestly, Bubba had been down here some in OVW. He was, they sent him down to help assistant coach and, check on some of the guys. That's kind of the relationship he had at that point. I don't know whether they were going to bring the boss man back or whatever. But I know I've said this before, it was just ridiculously stupid, rotten timing. Because when he passed away, it was just a couple of weeks before the first Midnight Express reunion that me and Bobby and Dennis did. And then the week after that was the first one with all 4 of us, me and Bobby and Stan and Dennis. And because that's when Dennis had just moved back to Alabama and got back in touch with everybody. And so from those that were initially booked, Bubba would have been the natural to be with us, on all those after that. And we did quite a few of those. Boys did more than I did, but those went on for 5, 6, 7 years. And he would have been on countless ones of those, whether they'd been using him as an in-ring wrestler or not. I would have probably seen him more then than I had since we were together in the 80s. And it didn't happen. But I mean, there's so many, goofy stories. I've told a bunch of them. Of Bubba trying to be the Bubba Rogers gimmick, or then, really making it he was one of Hulk Hogan's, as the boss man, one of Hulk Hogan's biggest drawing opponents in his singles runs in the 80s. I mean, the big run. And, Bubba called me one time and said, I just got my fucking check for last week. And this was in I guess when did you go? 88? This was in 1988. I said, what was it? He said, $12,000. The fuck? Because now think about this. We're down there in Charlotte making $3,500 a week, whatever, and we're thinking we're on top of the world. And Bubba goes up there and works with Hogan in the Boston Garden and the Madison Square Garden and the Spectrum, and has a $12,000 week. And that would be what today, since from 1988, somewhere around 30 or 35 grand. And this was for Bubba, he was. Let's see, 26 then, because he was a year younger than me. And he'd only been in the business 3 years, and he was just thrilled. He was tickled because he was like a big kid. And it was, he wasn't just about being greedy and all the money he was making or whatever, but it was like this guy from the middle of dipshit Georgia, gets into wrestling business, gets, broken in by Ted Allen and, taught basically almost nothing except how to do a job and say yes, sir. And Dusty sees something in him and gives him a gimmick. And everybody in the locker room takes to him, and everybody's showing him shit from the Midnight Express to the Road Warriors to fucking the Horsemen or whatever. He's becomes one of the guys immediately. Just so great to be around. And within 3 years of his first match in some dipshit spot show in Georgia, and 2.5 years after he was doing jobs on Atlanta TV for everybody, he's main eventing Madison Square Garden in a cage with Hulk Hogan, sold out and making a fortune. And he was still the same guy, but he was just astonished by it, how that could happen so quick. And he was just thrilled with everything. And that's, that I will tell you this, though. The reason why that he got out of the WWF in, what was that period, whenever he left in 93.
93, yeah.
93, right? Because he had come down and made some shots for Smoky Mountain. For me, as the big boss man, it works a deal with Kevin Sullivan. That's when I'd started working up there, and I asked for some dates on him, but he told me, he said he was leaving anyway, and he ended up doing it because he was convinced that Vince was going to go to prison. And also he was convinced that it was, if he was being the big boss man, and remember he was a babyface then, if he was being the big boss man in Law and Order and all that stuff, and it came out that Vince went to prison for drugs, that it would kill his gimmick if he was there. That's why he left. I swear to God. He didn't want to be around it. He didn't want to be involved. I said, Bubba, are you sure? I said, he may not go to hell. I don't want to be around. I don't know if I've told that story. That's what he told me on the phone.
I never heard that before.
He had no reason to make it up.
All right.
But he was a country boy too, and he took the shit seriously. But anyway, I never remember anybody having a problem with Bubba, any of the boys in the business. Even Bill Mulkey, when he knocked Bill Mulkey out on TV that day, Bill didn't blame him. And that's the only time I ever saw anybody talk sternly to him was when Dusty said, "Don't do shit you don't know how to do. Do not do shit you do not know how to do."
That should be on the wall of every wrestling locker room right now.
Boy, it should. It should. But it made him feel bad because he picked up this guy that's 150 pounds lighter than he was and planted him and knocked him goofy. And, you were publicly chastised for doing that. And you had to apologize, even though Bill was a job guy and Bubba was being pushed. And it was a nice lesson he learned. And he never did that one thing again. It wasn't even really his fault. He just weighed so much when they hit the ring. One of the boards flapped up and hit Bill in the back of the head, but he didn't protect him well. So he never did that one thing again.
All right, Jim, our final question this week here on the Drive Thru.
Yes.
Was sent to CornyDriveThru@gmail.com from Walter Buckley in Indianapolis.
Well, that sounds completely made up.
And actually, this is something I got involved with, so let me read this to you. On Thursday evening on Twitter, I tweeted to Dave Meltzer that I disagreed with his latest insane claim. He thinks that you'll agree with it. He said that the Sharps versus Kimura and Ricky Dozen was more significant and important than Andre the Giant versus Hulk Hogan at WrestleMania 3.
What?
Here is Dave's direct response to me. If you ask Jim Cornette what was more important historically, Ricky Dozen and Kimura versus the Sharps, or Hogan versus Andre, he'll know the answer. Everyone who knows history knows the answer to that question. Please ask him. He also responded to another Cult of Cornette member with a tweet, "Ask Jim Cornette the question. I dare you. Unless he hates me to the point where he would lie about the obvious, he knows. And well, history is his subject." I'd sincerely like to hear what you, Jim Cornette, and Brian Last have to say on this shocking matter. Signed, Walter Buckley, and I will say here at the top, I agreed with Dave. I agreed with Dave's take on this.
But he's saying that the Sharps and against Kimura and Ricky Dozan was more influential than Hogan and Andre.
Significant and important, but you could obviously say influential as well.
But in what context? In the context that, yes, it led to the his Japanese wrestling centrism is what I'm asking. Because yes,
yes and no. I mean, it created an industry in Japan.
Yes.
Hogan versus Andre was, and it's not to take anything away from the historical significance of Hogan versus Andre, but that wasn't the big game changer. You know, it didn't launch the WWF. The tag team match in Japan created everything. Everything that came after it is because of that.
Well, yeah, so the context that this question is being asked in is what was more historically significant to the entire professional wrestling industry as a whole globally, rather than what was more significant in this country or in what. Okay, I can get with that then. Yes, as far as Hogan and Andre, as far as a business milestone in terms of revenue, gate, attention, pay-per-view, whatever, that's more significant. But in terms of changing the industry globally, worldwide, not only creating it in Japan, but also doing a significant amount for tag team wrestling, you know, at the same time, yeah, that is historically significant in the wrestling industry, but it's something that almost no casual person in the United States would know ever happened.
Right. And that's the problem. Sometimes when Dave says something that is a historically accurate point, you get a lot of people who are, I don't even know if casual fan is the right term anymore, but American-centric wrestling fans who can't look at the bigger picture with something.
Well, okay, but sometimes it's the way the questioner is phrased or whatever, and without knowing where that was going from the start, Hogan and Andre was a more monumental event, a more memorable occurrence, as I said, bigger business generator, etc. But for something that happened that would lead to something else that would allow wrestling to spread into another country and spawn all the things that spun, yes, that was more. It was more of a business-changing moment, but it wasn't a huge match or a landmark event on its own. It was sort of like when you trace back the fucking oak tree to the seed. It was not an impressive. Andre and Hogan was an oak tree. The tag match with Ricky Dozan was a seed. It was not important in and of itself, but rather what it grew. See, I just actually explained that, didn't I?
Although, again, the Ricky Dozan match is one that I've heard it said that was one at a time, at least. It was taught to kids in elementary school about what happened there.
Yes,
that everyone who had a TV, you know, because TVs weren't everywhere yet, but whoever had a TV, the majority of them, I forget what the share is, and I'm not going to guess what the share was, but, you know, just about everyone in the country who had a TV was watching that match.
Well, they did that several times in the 50s and all with Ricky Dozan, that there weren't enough TVs to go around, so they would set up a TV in a window, and you'd see these pictures of thousands of people gathered to watch his match in the window of the store window of a TV in a store window is what I'm trying to say, or even broadcast on big screens in like a park. They would do that so that the people could see it because there was such a demand. But didn't he peak at like an 80? Was it him and Blassie or him and Thez did an 83 share, which meant 83 out of 100 people with televisions in the country were watching the match,
which is extraordinary.
It was it was either the world title with Thez or the deal with Blassie they did, where people had heart attacks watching Blassie biting him and fucking etc. Yeah. Here's another reason why they taught it in school, because think about this. It had been 10 years, 12 years, 13 years during his heyday in these big matches. It had been that amount of time since they got bombed into the Stone Age by the United States. And here, one of their native sports heroes, they thought he was Japanese.
They thought, that's right.
That's right. But if one of their native sports heroes is whipping all these big Americans, that's what led to him becoming the most beloved sports figure in the country of Japan and an icon to this day with the statues and the whole 9 yards, because that's the only revenge they ever got for World War II. Not to say that the people were out like, oh, let's fight another one, but is subliminally, even if they weren't actively wanting somebody to get even for them, subliminally, there was like, here we finally get the last word on these fucking Americans. And it was gold from that point. And like you said, these things were taught in school because it's the only comeback they ever got.
I chimed in and said that I think that, when you think about it, this could be the most influential match, the most historically significant match ever. Another one I thought was an interesting pick that I put, not really for the match itself, but look at everything that changed in Japanese wrestling because of Akira Maeda kicking Riki Choshu in the face. That was a game changer.
Yeah.
Everything changed after that. If I asked you, what is the most, or give me a short list of the most historically significant matches in wrestling history, what would you say?
Good God. This is one of those things that would drive me crazy because then I'd want to get books out and do research.
Yeah, I know. That's what happened to me. I know.
Well, you have to say Gotch and Hackenschmidt because that, even though it's not the start and William Muldoon came first and there was traveling champions and worked matches and all that kind of stuff, Gotch and Hackenschmidt were on the front pages and they kind of made it the big spectator thing. And when you can, before it, what was it in 1911, almost before cars, before any kind of modern transportation, they were still managed to put a crowd like that. Even in Chicago, it was on the level of a big championship boxing fight of the time. So that kind of started an industry with those guys drawing both their matches, but especially the second one.
A couple other picks I know that Dave wrote were the main event to WrestleMania 1 because of just how much was on the line there, which you can understand. I think Bruno versus Buddy Rogers in 1963.
Yeah.
It's an interesting thing to sit down and try to think of what are the most historically significant matches in wrestling history. It is an interesting thing to think about.
And also think about this. The most historically significant matches, Bruno and Buddy Rogers went 48 seconds. The second Gotch and Hackenschmidt match was a fucking double cross. Either they weren't classic matches or they didn't go as planned or other things happened. Sometimes, and it's like when Austin 316 was born, that was not a marketing plan. That was, he cut a promo, people brought signs and shit happened. Sometimes the best stuff just kind of happens or comes from shit you're working around. And that was a complete with Ricky Dozan was a complete fucking, it wasn't a reach to imagine that when Bobby Bruns did the first tour, right? In Japan.
That's right.
If we could get a local guy, well, fuck, that's since the dawn of time. We mentioned that when we talked about Tracy Smothers a few weeks ago. The idea of a local hero in wrestling or in sports was not an earth-shaking revolutionary thought. You just need to find the right guy. Anyway.
Well, with that, and this is something we can continue to think about for the future, the drive-thru has closed. Let's get
You were off on that last note.
Yeah, I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. Why is this
one? Yeah, you're going to edit out your clunker.
No, this one, what is... All right, there we go. I used a different one. See, the other one
How many kalimbas do you have over there, Maurice White?
I have two at the desk.
Just in case the first kalimba breaks down.
They're different sizes, different sounds. One has more notes. But speaking of that, on that note, you can hear the drive-thru when it debuts next Tuesday with a Survivor Series review as well as a watch-along of Tully Blanchard, Magnum TA, Starrcade 85, I Quit match with Baby Doll at ringside. That's next Tuesday on the drive-thru. The Jim Cornette Experience debuts Friday, wherever you find your favorite podcasts. You can follow Jim on Twitter at @TheJimCornette. You can follow me on Twitter at @GreatBrianLast. You can hear me on the 605 Superpodcast at 605pod.com. Available wherever you find your favorite podcast. Later this week, the Observer Hall of Fame special with various voters talking about their ballots, who got in, who didn't get in, and much more.
Yeah, let's see who admits to voting for Twinkle Toes.
Don't forget, you can hear classic episodes of The Experience and The Drive-Thru, including the very first time Jim ever ripped on Kenny Omega by becoming a patron. Patreon.com/Cornette for only $5 a month to get access to the archives from the very beginning in November of 2013 up until the fall of 2015 with new episodes added each and every Sunday evening. Patreon.com/Cornette. The official Jim Cornette YouTube channel, tinyurl.com/officialcornyyoutube, or just go to YouTube and search for Jim Cornette. It'll be the first thing that pops up. Clips of episodes, full episodes, omnibus collections, all with the incredible and exclusive Travis Heckel artwork. The official Jim Cornette YouTube channel. Don't forget about Cornette's collectibles at jimcornette.com. So much stuff, so little time. Send your money today to Cornette's Collectibles. Go to jimcornette.com and shop for t-shirts, restraining orders, autograph photos, DVDs, books, and so much more. Face masks. Don't forget about those. jimcornette.com. But until Friday on The Experience and next Tuesday, right back here on the Drive Thru, for Jim Cornette, I am the great Brian Last. Tally ho!